Warning! Today's story contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and strong language. Viewer discretion is advised.
These stories will never, ever make sense to me. Ever.
Interesting.
Suspish.
Uh-oh.
Suspish.
You make good choices.
You make good choices.
You make good choices. I will now get into the story, okay? The most annoying thing happened to me the other day. Someone tried to hack me, per usual. Years ago I would have been shocked and upset, but nowadays, it didn't surprise me, which is dumb. But it feels like no matter what you do, all your information ends up on the internet, and it could be very frustrating. That's when I decided to take my personal data back with Incogni, the sponsor of today's episode. Whether you're checking your email or just doing an innocent little Google search, our data is constantly being gathered and sold by data brokers. These brokers are stealing details like names, addresses, social media profiles, and even social security numbers to build profiles on us. Then they sell our profiles to advertising companies. Yeah. And that info usually ends up in the hands of scammers, fraudsters, and it just leads to endless spam calls, emails, hacking, everything. And it's not just annoying, it puts you, your family, everyone, your job at risk. And this is where Incogni comes in to save the day. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf. They request that they remove your personal data and they handle any of their objections. All you have to do is create an account, choose your subscription, then sit back and let them do the work. They also keep your data off of the market by doing repeated removals, taking it down if it shows up again. The other day I was getting 10 spam calls a day. My information always gets leaked. And it made me not even want to look at my phone. I was just it's frustrating. So I signed up for Incogni, and within days, it just felt like, all these spam calls, everything was stopping. I was finally able to get rid of them. Look, if you're interested, but still not sure you want to sign up, there's no risk in trying Incogni. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So check them out today. Take your personal data back with Incogni. Use code Bailey at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan. Incogni.com/Bailey.
I've mentioned this before in a previous video of mine where I told you guys my dirty little secret. I told you that something that really interests me, something that really gets my noggin going, reading or learning about cannibalism? I don't know. I think because what I have gathered is that it's so far opposite of anything that I know or experienced. So I just get obsessed with learning about it. I told you guys I'm a very curious cat. Meow. Cannibals. You can't live with them. We could definitely live without them, okay? Welcome to Chili's. This story takes place in Russia. When I was researching these cases in Russian media, they blurred out the face of the victims and also they didn't share their names. In the US and UK articles, they shared images and names of the victims just to not step on anyone's toes. Look, you never know who's watching, seriously. I'm not going to mention any victims' names or show the images of them. I don't know. So yeah, I'm just not going to, okay? I don't know what the right thing to do. I'm just me in my room, How am I supposed to approach these sometimes? Today's story is about Dmitri Bakshiva. Dmitri was born in 1982 in southern Russia, and shortly after his birth, he was placed into an orphanage. It said that his birth mother at the time was just not in a position to where she could take care of her child. She had to give her baby away. She didn't want to, but that's, I guess, what she had to do. Dmitri was staying in an orphanage until the age of 3 years old. And at this time, he was then adopted by a lovely married couple named Svetlana and Vladimir. Growing up, it was said that Dmitri, he was shy. He loved animals, but he also just liked playing by himself. He was a loner, is what his adopted parents would say. When Dmitri was 15 years old, his adopted mother, she was diagnosed with cancer, and sadly, it was quick, she passed away. It was said a week later she passed away. So it just was bad news, awful news, not even bad news, just boom, boom, Dmitri's adopted father turned really mean and violent towards him. He kicked Dmitri out of the house at 15 years old. He told him, don't return You're not wanted here. So he kicks him out. The translation was a little rough here, but I think when he kicked him out, he either gave him like a loaf of bread, like here's your food, good luck, or he gave him a piece of bread, but there was bread involved. He gave him like bread and was like, bye. So Dmitri had to do what he had to do. I mean, like, he would sleep wherever he could, and whether it be like neighbor's house, anyone's house, and eventually poor Dmitri just ended up on the street. He was struggling to find a job with frustrations building up. His only option was to rob a store and steal a car. And most of the times I don't condone that. I mean, I really don't condone that, but like I understand. I come from a place of understanding. Robs this store. He hops into the stolen car. He tries to take off. He doesn't get far. Doesn't get far at all. He gets caught. He gets arrested. Gets taken to prison. Now, while in prison, it's said that his adopted father never visited him and no one came to see him. It's sad because like when you're 15, 16 years old, you're in prison and nobody's there for you. You have nobody. I mean, that has to be really, really hard. You know, when I was reading this, I was like, man, that fucking sucks. Oops, sorry. That sucks. Dmitri ends up staying in prison for a little bit. He, does his time and then he gets released. And when he gets released, he's out. He needs to find a job now. So he gets lucky and he finds a job doing construction, paying well. He was excited to have a job, have some kind of income, Things are, looking up. He has a roof over his head and a job. I mean, now Dmitri's personal life, his social life, it wasn't too great, okay? He didn't really have any friends. He never had a girlfriend before. And he was still considered a loner. People who interacted with Dmitri, like his fellow coworkers, they would say that Dmitri was, quote, untidy, and that he liked to talk with strange people. It's said that Dmitri liked to hang around local bars, and he liked to hang around people who liked to drink a lot, although Dmitri he rarely drank himself. People just thought that was weird, and they just gave him the title as the weird one. Now, one night while he's, out, at least he's trying to have a social life. What assholes? Maybe he just felt more comfortable in front of people who were drinking. I didn't think about that. You guys, rude. While Dmitri was out at one of these bars trying to at least attempt to have a social life, that's where he met this woman named Natalia. Now, Natalia is also a character. Not a character, I'm so sorry. Natalia is also involved in this story. So let me give you a little background about Natalia. She was also born in southern Russia. And Natalia was born in 1975. She was raised by her mother and her grandmother. And during Natalia's preteen years, her mother sadly passed away. So she was left just with her grandmother who raised her until she was an adult. Natalia would often talk to her classmates and even her grandmother about how she wanted to become a doctor. Like, that was her goal. She was going to be a doctor. Once Natalia finished high school, she went on to medical school in Kuban. Natalia, now an adult, she worked some time as a senior nurse in the sanitation department of Krasnodar. I rolled that R. But there, she worked at a higher military aviation school. And while she was there, soon after, she met her first husband, and he worked as an officer. So she meets her first husband. Cool. Awesome. They hit it off. They get married. At the age of 23, Natalia and her husband, they have their first son together. They welcome him home. Not long after she had her son, her husband passed away. Yeah, there's just a lot of death going on so far, right? Off to a rough start. We all have the ways that we cope with loss and hurt and pain and all that stuff. And the way that Natalia dealt with her pain and her hurt was that she began to drink a lot. So then what? Okay, so she's like trying her best to like keep moving forward, but at the same time, she just had a lot of loss and she's not doing well. So she starts drinking a lot. She began to mix her alcohol with her drugs. Like, she started doing drugs as well, and she just started mixing the two. And that's something you definitely should not do. She got to a point where she kind of thought like, I can't I can't do this anymore. My life is just kind of a mess. She began to not care about keeping her home nice and clean. She started not to just care about life. So then she decided to just check herself into a mental hospital. She thought that she needed help. So she was like, I'm going to try and receive help. Now, when Natalia gets there to the psychiatric hospital, she tells the doctor that like she thinks something's wrong. She thinks she has some kind of manic disorder. So this doctor decides to do some tests on her, and they come back and they tell Natalia there's nothing wrong with her. She's 100% fine, and they let her go. Now, this is a side note, but there is a theory going around that she didn't really need to go to the mental hospital. The main reason that she went there was to have this on her record. Not because she was really sick or wanted to stay. She just wanted to be there and have like a paper trail that would back up her story. It'll make sense in a bit. Natalia ends up getting fired or let go from her job because she was drinking a lot and it was affecting her work, which honestly did not slow her down. I mean, if anything, that made it worse for her. Natalia is going out and she's drinking a lot, and that's when she meets Dmitri. Remember? We talked about him earlier today. Now, Natalia was 7 years older than Dmitri. It didn't bother the couple. They really hit it off. They seemed to have a lot in common. Now, shortly after meeting, Natalia's like, hey, my husband just died. You want to move in? I have extra room. Dmitri ends up moving in with Natalia pretty quickly after meeting her. Natalia and Dmitri ended up dating for about 5 years, and then they ended up deciding, hey, you know what? This is really working out. We're just like really doing this. Great. We should get married. And so they decided to get married. And remember I mentioned in the earlier that Natalia had a son. You know, not much is said about like where he was at during this time. And I don't want to, I don't want to piss anyone off. So I'm just kind of like tiptoeing around him. But he was there for the relationship. But once they got married, something happened where he just was not into it. And the son, Natalia's son, he ends up moving out of the home. A family acquaintance would later come forward and say that her son was really embarrassed by her drinking. And he just decided, you know what, I'm just going to cut ties with her because I just can't do it anymore. So that's what he decided to do. And he ends up moving out, and he moves on with his life. Once Natalia's son moved out, that's when they decided, Dmitri and Natalia, they decided to move. Dmitri was having a really hard time finding work. Things really slowed down for him. He thought if they moved, they could have new opportunities. And at the end of the day, hopefully just have more work. He got bills to pay. So the couple moves, and they're ready to start new opportunities, new lives, new chapter. Now, September 11th, 2017. Now, this was not long ago, baby. This was 2 years ago. Yeah, I had to count it. So there's a road crew who's out working construction. These guys, they see like something on the side of the street. They're like, what is that? Let's go check it out. So they go and they check it out, these construction worker guys. And they pick it up and they're like, it's a cell phone. Cool. So they did what a lot of us would probably do, and nobody would admit that they did it. Liars, because I know you would. But they open up the phone and they go straight to the photos. Curious cat. What's in here? Whose phone is this? Let's go look. And that's when they see something that they probably wish they never saw. While scrolling through the photos, I mean, I guess it was like the second photo in, so they really didn't scroll that far, okay? Scroll, boom, there. What did they see? It's a photo of a man with different parts of what seems to be like a dismembered human body, and it's in his mouth. So it's a selfie with body parts, human body parts that were not his, in his mouth. So this obviously freaks out the construction workers. They're like, holy shit. So they call up authorities. Authorities come down and they take the phone in for evidence. Police are able to go through the phone and see like, okay, what's the situation? What's the stitch? Did I say what's the stitch? They see exactly what the guys were talking about. It was a man. It was a photo of a man. It was a selfie. He was posing with a woman's head. What seemed to be like a hand. He was holding the head and he had the hand in his mouth. Now, the hand was like dismembered. Also, her head was dismembered as well. So then authorities are like, well, let's just keep scrolling in here. And of course, there's just more photos of what seems to be dead bodies, body parts, wigs, lots of wigs. Hold that thought. But based off of these photos, I mean, they had to find whose phone this belonged to. Authorities were able to take out the SIM card inside of the phone. They were able to put it into their system, and they were able to see that the phone belonged to somebody named Dmitri. They go and they pick up Dmitri, and they also pick up his wife, Natalia, and they bring them in for questioning. Now, while they are being questioned, of course, they're separated, so they're not in there together. So first they question Natalia, and they say hey, so we found this image on your husband's phone. Can you maybe fill us in on what this is? Can you explain what this is? Has he ever killed anybody? And Natalia sees the image, and she's just like, what? That's crazy. I had no idea. What? And so authorities just keep pushing because they can tell that something's not right with Natalia's response. She's just if authorities pulled you into an office and was like, hey, we found your husband's phone and there seems to be dead bodies on here. We all have different ways we would act, our response to things like this, right? But Natalia's response was just so out of the ordinary. So they were pushing her on it. So do you know what this photo is? Why would he have this on his phone? Yeah, Natalia, why? They keep pushing and pushing Natalia. She goes from being what? That's crazy, to now she's starting to talk a little bit. She tells authorities probably the stupidest thing I've heard in a very long time. She tells authorities that she was walking home one day and she had Dimitri's phone on her. When she was walking home, she came across a dead body. I know, weird, just and she decided to take photos of it. And that would explain the photos on the phone. Of course, authorities are not buying this, but she denied. I don't know what you're talking about. I was walking home one day and I saw a dead body and I took a picture of it, you guys. It's not a big deal. Now, I don't know how it works out there, but I have a feeling, I don't know. I doubt there's just dead bodies everywhere, right? I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know shit. Authorities get access to the place where they stayed at, and this is where they realized the couple was just a damn mess. If you've ever watched the show Hoarders, well, it looked a lot like that. There's trash, there's clothes, there's just stuff jammed packed in every corner of their place. Clothes are seen across the floor. Don't even know what the floor looks like. Papers and other clutter on just about every surface of this place. It's not very big, but wow, it was bad. So they're looking around, they're digging for evidence or something. Maybe that will answer some questions as to what this was on the phone, because that's what they're trying to solve. Okay, and look. This is where it gets rough. One of the authorities are going through the kitchen junk drawer that we all have that just has just junk in it is the best way to describe it, the kitchen junk drawer. Well, Natalia and Dmitri had one of those as well. But in this junk drawer, they had numerous cell phones in there. They counted up to 10, I believe, just cell phones. So what's that about? They find a stack of photographs. Wait, how's that song go? Look at this photograph. Now, authorities come across a stack of photos, and they were going through this huge stack. I mean, they were wow, these people really like taking photos because there's so many of them. There was tons of photos, and they're looking through and they're just seeing all these different people, okay? Lots of different people. Natalia and Dmitri all hanging out with just a bunch of people. So they're thinking, these are obviously their friends and stuff. They're all hanging out. And then the stack of photographs just really took a dark turn. One of the photos, get this. I saw the photo, okay? Oh my God. One of the photos that they found was of a man's head. Now, it's a severed head. It's a real head, chopped, okay? And it's presented on a silver platter. I'm not kidding you. It's on a silver platter. The head, and we have the silver platter, and then around, the head, it's surrounded by fruit. Orange slices, to be exact. So they're examining this photo and they see that olives were inserted into this man's eye sockets. Olives. There was a lemon placed on this person's nose. Now, when they look at the date of the photograph, it was dated December 28th, 1999. Now, at this point, when authorities are going through their home, it's 2017. This photograph was dated 1999. How long has this been going on for? Is this the only one? I mean, obviously it couldn't have been because they just found that body on the phone. Next, they go over to the refrigerator, and next to the refrigerator is like a little cabinet. On top of the cabinet is the microwave, and like in front of the microwave is what seems to be like a wig. They're thinking it's a wig because it straight up looks like somebody just took off their wig, set it down, made something beep, 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 bada boom, bada bing. They got in, they got out. You know, like it's what it looked like. It looked exactly like a wig. Well, it wasn't a wig. They examined it a little bit closer. And, okay, so it was obviously woman's hair because it was lengthy and it was curled and it was styled, highlights or whatever. But it was like obvious to them that it was a lady's head. And what happened was it was taken off of somebody's head and they don't know who. It was scalped. When they examined this closer, they saw that somebody had like taken, you know, like a knife, something, and cut out around the hair, just the hair. So strange. Scalped it off of the victim, and then they just like left it there in front of the microwave. Authorities go, they open up the refrigerator. In these cannibal stories in the past, the refrigerator is never a good place. Nothing good happens in there. Inside of the refrigerator, they found mason jars. Inside of these mason jars, there were human parts which were in saline solution. It was skin, meat, and fat. And they had like stacked them in these jars like some, I don't know, like some crap you'd see on Pinterest, you know, when they do it by color, like strawberries, kiwi, pineapple, like by color, it's all organized. That was a terrible example. It was very organized. I feel so bad for these authorities in any of these cases because this probably causes some serious PTSD. So then at this point, authorities are thinking, is any of the food in this refrigerator actual food? There would be the mason jars. There was like a bowl. There was a random ass chicken in there. Not a chicken still alive, like the chicken breast and everything was just like thrown in there, not on a plate or anything. A bunch of animals. And they were like, we don't even know if any of this stuff is actual food or if this is evidence, right? Is this chicken or what? Like, what is this? So they did what they thought was best. I'm so sorry for laughing. I just got this mental picture. They unplug the refrigerator and they take it in as evidence, just the whole damn thing. They were like, you know what? We have to test everything. And honestly, that's a great move. They had found around 19 pieces. You heard that right. 19 pieces of human skin, which had allegedly been removed from their victims. Authorities found 7 packs of frozen body parts, human remains pickled in a jar, photographs upon photographs of people, body parts, of a lot. So get this. Hold on. They find a recipe book, which was found in the kitchen underneath some clutter. Bailey, a recipe book? That's not that bad. Nay. This was not just a normal recipe book. This recipe book was going into detail about dinners to make with human remains. Allegedly, this was in Natalia's handwriting, and it was her book. Betty Crocker would never. It was recipe upon recipe on what to do with different parts of the meat and fat and skin from people. And the cherry on top, oh yeah, because that's not all. Nope. Authorities found a videotape. It was a tutorial. I kid you not, it was a tutorial. Video lessons for cannibals. And it was explaining how to dismember and get certain meat and fat off of your victims. Side note, I could not find like if the video was of Natalia or Dmitri or if the video was somebody else. And that part had me messed up. I don't know. They didn't say anything. So at this point, authorities could like officially make an arrest and put them in prison and then question them a little bit deeper as to what the F are you guys doing? So they got Natalia first again. Now this time they come at her with the actual photographs that they had found inside the home. So like Natalia couldn't deny it. She has to have some answers for them. They're looking for answers here. So authorities show Natalia the photographs. They are showing her the okay, sorry, why do I do this every time? So they are showing her a bunch of different photos that they had brought in, and they were mixed shots of various body parts they took photos of, and then also just the different people that they also had photos of. Because to authorities, it looked like photographs of like you hanging out with your friends, and then the next shot is like a body part. Yeah, can you identify like who's this? So Natalia went through photos and she was able to identify up to 30 different people that she or they allegedly had killed and dismembered. She tells authorities that her and Dmitri dismembered them, ate them as well. That's what Natalia tells authorities. And then she tries to backtrack. She's so annoying. Now, it's unclear as to why they took pictures of everything, but when verified, authorities were able to see that the names Natalia had given them of the victims, they were actual people who were considered missing at the time. So things were kind of lining up. This wasn't looking good. Here's my question. This is what I was thinking the whole time, because these are photos that you had to go and get developed. These were not like Polaroids. A lot of them were like a 1-hour photo type of deal. Well, maybe they know how to develop their own photos. Their house is so cluttered. I just don't understand how they would be able to do that. Let's just say they were dropping these photos off somewhere to get developed. Okay, let's just say that's what they were doing. Didn't anybody notice the photos? No? So Natalia also mentioned that the couple had a cellar nearby. They had a cellar, another place where they kept even more of the victims' body parts and lots of their possessions. And one thing that was common throughout these photos, they always seemed to sever the heads and then scalp the hair from the skull. And I don't know, like that was a new one for me. I never, with a lot of the cannibals that I have talked about previously, I think there was one case maybe where they scalped. Yeah, Ed Gein, he scalped, but Dmitri and Natalia seem to do it with almost every victim with long, beautiful hair. I just have so many questions. I just have a lot of questions. What was that about? Then there's something to it. I just don't know what. Maybe they were selling the hair? It doesn't matter. So authorities asked Natalia, can you tell us like why you guys did this? Can you give us something to work with? And she didn't want to speak on any of that. So then Dmitri was questioned. It was his turn now. And he shared a lot more than Natalia did. Dmitri said on September 8th, 2017, Dmitri, who, by the way, was 35 at the time, and Natalia was 42. They were on a dating site. So I guess they would go on different websites to meet new people. I'm not sure if it was like for sexual relations or just friends. Well, I mean, duh, Bailey. They were doing it for victims, you stupid ass. They were doing it to find victims. They were on this dating site and they decided to meet up with this lady that they had been chatting with. Dmitri and Natalia deciding to meet up with this woman. They go out for some drinks, and after a couple of drinks, they leave and they decide to go home. Now, allegedly, Natalia was getting really jealous of Dmitri and this new lady. They were getting along really well, a little too well, and Natalia ended up just getting really upset, very heated, and then she just kind of went off on them and walked away. This is when Dmitri at some point whipped out this knife that he always carried on him in his pocket. He whips out this knife and he starts stabbing this woman. And then when Natalia saw him attacking her, according to her, she watched, but she didn't participate. Dmitri's version was that Natalia saw Dmitri attacking this woman. After he was stabbing her, that's when Natalia approached and joined in. At this point, they ended up dismembering her, and that's when they took the selfies with the body parts. The next day, Dmitri had dropped his phone, which they found, the construction workers on the road, remember? When authorities asked Dmitri, why did you cut off the scalp before getting rid of your victim's remains? And Dmitri said, quote, I just did something stupid, end quote. He just did something stupid. All right, yeah, no worries. You're free to go. Don't worry about it. You just did something stupid. So both of them were sent to prison. Now, Natalia tried to say that she was mentally not well. She asked to speak with a psychiatrist alone, and she explained that if they looked at her record, they would see that she went to a psychiatric hospital for help before, which, remember, in like the beginning of the story, I said that she went to the psychiatric hospital because she was drinking and mixing drugs. She wanted help. This is where that theory comes in, because she tells authorities, go ahead and look at my record. You're going to see that I went to a psychiatric hospital because I have a mental illness, and, I shouldn't be sent to prison because of that. She was really hoping that it would back up her story. To be fair, I'm obviously not a doctor, but wouldn't you kind of like believe that, these two are not well? I'd be like, yeah, I agree. You are not well. A psychiatrist comes in to see her, and after hours, it was like 3 to 4 hours of speaking with a psychiatrist, concluded that Natalia was 100% fine. They didn't believe that she had any mental illness. They believed that she could have suffered from schizophrenia, but both of them were aware of what they had done, and both realized what they were doing in the moment and would be held accountable to the law. For this investigation, they brought in the most experienced investigators and a forensic investigator, as well as a professor and a doctor of psychological sciences. They brought in like the bigwigs for this case because they wanted answers. They wanted answers because something like this had never happened before. Based off that first image, that photograph from 1999, this went on for almost 20 years. It could have been even longer than that. They don't know. They just have that one picture. They didn't get caught within that whole 20 years. So authorities are like, we need to figure out how can we prevent this from happening again in the future. How come they didn't get caught? Like where, why, what? They just wanted answers. So in February of 2019, Natalia was found guilty of incitement to murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in a penal colony, which I had to look up because I was like, what does that mean? I didn't know. And anytime I don't know something here on YouTube, people in the comment section always want to tell me what a dumbass I am because I don't know something. I'm sorry I don't know everything out there on the planet. But I looked it up. Penal colony or exile colony is a settlement used to separate them, the prisoners, from the general population by placing them in a remote location, often an island or a distant colonial territory, which is like, oh, you know what? Like, that doesn't sound bad. You get like your own island? Of course not, you fool. Now, there have been many cases of abuse reported in these situations. A lot of the inmates have alleged that they were treated as slaves and they were put to work to benefit the chief there. Like, a lot of these places make garments. I literally just read an article about a man who was in the same situation but in China, and they had him making Christmas cards. These companies will outsource, not knowing that, these people in these really bad prisons are making these things. Oh, it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess. Yeah, so these prisoners are making them money. Person in charge, they just pocketed all of the money. Many people complained about it, but then they would just like go missing. It was one of those. So with that being said, that's where Natalia was headed. Good luck. But guess what? She was only going there for 10 years. They sentenced her to 10 years, and then she would have to serve 1.2 years in prison. On June 28th, 2019, Dmitri was sentenced to 12 years and 2 months in a maximum security prison. Dmitri also has supervision, and he is the one who will be receiving treatment by a psychiatrist. Now, somebody that they don't know, somebody leaked the images from Dmitri's phone to the media, and this caused a lot of issues and a lot of upset. For starters, the media out there, they didn't want this information to be out there to the public, but because it was released to the media, people were just losing their shit over this story. There were so many theories coming out, so many rumors, people were on it and people were talking. People were saying that they believed that this was like a larger family of cannibals or like a tight-knit group of people who considered themselves like family of cannibals that operated within the city. These people believed there's no possible way that the two of them could murder and dismember up to 30 people and not get caught. There's no way. There has to be more people involved. They believe that like Natalia and Dmitri, they were like the sacrificial lamb. They would get the blame for all the murders and go to prison while this group of people would remain safe. You know, like, yeah, the sacrifice. Take one for the team. Kind of like Harvey Weinstein. Like, he was not the only one doing what he was doing, but like, he was the bait. He was the one that everyone blamed and all the fingers pointed to him. Don't get me wrong. He was a piece of shit, a toad, trash. He 100% did some nasty shit, but that's all going on out here. It wasn't just him, but he was the one, like the sacrifice. Like, you're taking one for the team and don't rat us out. So they get in trouble. They go to prison. And everyone else is like, yay, the bad guy is locked up. When in reality, there's plenty more responsible. Why don't they speak, you ask? You're like, Bailey, what's the benefit of this? Why would they keep quiet? Why wouldn't they just rat everybody else? Because if you rat people out, especially this group that you're supposed to be protecting, then you get offed. Like that Jeffrey Epstein guy. Look at that Harvey guy. Why can't I say his last name? Did he even go to prison? You ugly toad, go to prison, you know? But he won't because he's rich and he's gonna get away with it. Watch, because they always effing do. And if they rat anybody out, you get offed. A lot of people believe that Dmitri and Natalia were protecting something much bigger. Investigators allegedly, they never found a full body in their search. It was always bits and pieces that were recovered. They were able to get DNA matches from some of the victims. So the total amount was unclear based off of what I found. Natalia said 30, but they couldn't confirm that unless they were able to locate all of the victims and confirm that. Dmitri only confessed to killing 2 people. And they couldn't even locate the first victim from 2012. So riddle me this. Did Natalia's first husband really just die? Because I couldn't find out what he died of, you know what I'm saying? So that was the story about Natalia and Dmitri. They were given the name by the media, the Cannibal family. I'm trying to be better and not apologize for things, but I am sorry. I am sorry if I was a little like all over the place or kind of rough today. I'm not feeling good. And my contour looks awful. Up close, I look a goddamn mess. I hope you found today's story interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I have lots of questions for you. Do you think Natalia was the one in charge and she manipulated Dmitri into doing this? Do you think her son knew and then he just bolted out of there and was like, I don't want anything to do with you? Do you feel like a lot of people knew way more? Do you think there was a bigger tribe of people involved? I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Maybe if I lost the clips. Anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day today. You make good choices. Yeah, just happy holidays. I will see you next week. Please be safe out there. Please, please, please be safe out there. Make good choices. Love and appreciate you guys so much. And I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye. Okay, today we're going to be talking about Catherine Knight. Are you familiar? You probably are, because she was a big deal. I think she still is, but not really. Shut up, Bailey. Get to the point. Okay, so Catherine Knight lived in Aberdeen, New South Wales, which is north of Sydney, Australia. A little background, she worked in a slaughterhouse in 1971. She then worked on animal carcasses, and she would work in the boning room, so she would get all the meat off of the animals, and she would cut the marrow off as well. Her coworkers would say like she was really good with a knife and she was really good at her job. Based off of reports, it seemed like she also really enjoyed it. Catherine, though, she in her personal life had a string of bad relationships. First marriage. While working as a boner in the butcher shop, Catherine met a guy named David. We'll call him David K. David K. His last name's Collette, I think. Collette. David was reported to be a raging alcoholic and prone to fistfights or just fighting. So he would drink and then he would fight. It was reported that David would try to beat Catherine, but she could hold her own. So David quickly learned that Catherine actually could throw down. She never backed down and she always would fight back. So if he tried to attack her, she would come at him 10 times harder. In 1974, Catherine convinced David to get married. Even though they had problems in the relationship, marriage seemed like a good idea. So they got married, and throughout the marriage, David was obviously drunk because he was an alcoholic, which would cause issues in the relationship, in anyone's relationship, really. On their wedding night, after lovemaking, David fell asleep and Catherine got really upset. So it triggered something in her, and some people reported that it had to do with hearing friends and family saying, oh, we did it 3 to 4 times a night on our wedding night. So she was like comparing her wedding night to what she's heard it's supposed to be like. So when they only did it one time and then David fell asleep, it made Catherine really upset. So she then decided to strangle him because I guess that just made sense to her. But he ended up waking up and he fought Catherine off of him. So despite Catherine almost killing David on the first night of their marriage, they ended up staying together for 10 years. In those 10 years, they had 2 daughters. Also in that 10 years, David ended up leaving one time. So apparently David had snuck out of the house in the middle of the night to try and leave Catherine. And when he left, it sent Catherine into a really deep depression. At one point, Catherine ended up staying in a psychiatric hospital for a couple of months after she had gone to a mechanic who had worked on David's car. She tried to fight him, or she threatened to kill him. You see, she was upset with the mechanic because the mechanic had fixed David's car, which helped get David away from Catherine. So she was upset at the mechanic because how dare he help David get away from her. In her mind, it made sense. To us, we're like, girl, no. And once she got out, her and David actually ended up back together again. It didn't last long though, and then they ended up separating. Once Catherine and David had been separated for a while, then Catherine met another David named David Saunders, and they ended up in a relationship. David number 2. A few months after meeting, David and Catherine ended up moving in together. So everything was moving very quick. But he also kept his own apartment. So he's kind of living in 2 places at one time. David did not want to move in with Catherine. He liked having his own place. And this pissed Catherine off. To her, it meant that he was living this double life. He obviously had his, like, a whole nother separate life that he didn't want to combine his life with hers. It probably means that he's cheating on her. It made her mad because it meant that he just didn't want to spend time with her. It really set her off and made her just very upset to a degree that you and I probably don't understand, because what she did to prove that she was upset is just like, what? In an argument, Catherine took their 2-month-old puppy. She slit the puppy's throat in front of David just to show him what she was capable of. If that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. After some time, I'm sorry for laughing. This isn't funny, but this part's kind of funny. You see, her reasoning behind slitting the puppy's throat was that she was just cranky. Like, that was her excuse. That she was just cranky. Despite all like that happening, they ended up having a daughter together. And shortly after the daughter was born, there was an altercation. They got into a fight, and Catherine stabbed David with a pair of scissors. I'm not really sure what the fight was and if he reported it or not. I guess I could have dug a little bit deeper on that one, but I didn't. That relationship ended. So then Catherine gets into another relationship. His name is John Chillingworth. They actually had a relationship for about 3 years. There wasn't much abuse going on in this new relationship. They ended up having a son together. And it's said that this relationship was really calm and good because most of the time Catherine was cheating on John with another man whose name was John Price. It said that her relationship was good because she was having an affair, and so that's why, like, there was no reports of her being crazy. So John was 45 at the time, and this would just be the relationship that really pushed her over the edge. When the relationship first started, it was going really well. They would go out socially, have some drinks with friends at the local pub. John had 2 Wait, are these all the same names? John had 2 children who lived with him. They were a little bit older though, so they weren't young. And the children reported to really like Catherine. They didn't have any issues with her. John worked in the local mines and he made pretty good money and he did really well for himself. But Catherine did suggest to John that they get married. But John actually declined. He was like, no, this isn't a good idea. I don't really want to get married. And when he declined, that's when obviously things, once again, just didn't go so well. That's when friends would notice that Catherine started to become very verbally abusive towards him. Mentally, she was always in his head. She would also become physically abusive with John as well. So she was just beating the poor guy up. The worst thing about, this isn't the worst thing about her, but the thing with Catherine is when she was upset, she would always fight with vengeance. Like, she wouldn't just fight with you like a normal person. With Catherine, she was just cutthroat. Like, one thing she had done was John took home a first aid kit from his work, and Catherine took video of it showing that the first aid kit was in his possession, and then she sent that to John's boss, which then got him fired because to the company it was seen as him stealing property or whatever. So she did that because she was mad at him that he wouldn't get married to her, but then she ended up getting him fired. So now John's like, dude, what the fuck? I mean, it turns out the first aid kit was only worth like $20. So it was really upsetting to John, and John actually ended up kicking her out of the house that they lived in, which was John's house. So John was fired from his job, and then he kicked Catherine out. They actually were apart for about 3 months, but somehow Catherine would always weasel her way back in with these guys. So Catherine would constantly pressure John to marry her. I don't know what it is with her in marriage. Like, she just wanted to be married. John refused, and it would just lead to more and more fights. Their friends and their family started to notice it even more. Anytime that there was an altercation, though, between Catherine and John would go tell a friend what was going on. That way he always had a witness or somebody who knew what happened, just in case Catherine wanted to flip the script and act like she was the victim in the relationship. So at least he was kind of smart in that sense. Like, he was trying to let people know, like, this is what happened. If you hear something else, then it's a lie. So eventually John ended up calling the police because he wanted Catherine out of the house. He wanted her gone and she wouldn't leave. So he called the police thinking that, they could pretty much escort Catherine out of the household. He could get rid of her, just remove her from my house. But the police came back saying that John needed a court order to get her removed from the house. In February of 2000, there was a fight between Catherine and John, which ended with a chest wound. So Catherine tried to stab John, and she ended up going to police and reported that he was being violent towards her, and it was in self-defense. She then took a restraining order out against him. But these restraining orders, no matter like who got one, they would always end up back together. I think John knew that something was going to happen because he ended up telling coworkers if he ever goes missing or something happens to him, that it was Catherine. Catherine would kill him. So he was telling coworkers this and really just like being open about it. He also sat down his boss and told his boss everything that was going on as well. And the same thing, if anything had happened to him, that it was Catherine. The bitch is crazy. So John ends up going to the courts because he wants to get Catherine removed from the house and also a restraining order against her. So he goes to the courts, he tells them everything that's going on, and he left there with a restraining order which would limit contact from Catherine. But of course they went ignored by Catherine. Like, she didn't give two shits. So a little while later, John comes home from work and he has like a whole routine where he goes to the neighbors, he says hello, checks in with everybody, and then he ends up falling asleep. We're going to bed at 11 p.m. Catherine came home shortly after that. She made herself dinner, she watched some TV, she took a shower, and then she went up to bed and she woke John up. They had sexual relations and then they went back to bed. Well, John went back to bed. Catherine kept a butcher's knife in her bedstand next to the bed in one of the drawers. Suspicious. And then this is when everything just goes bad. And I don't know what exactly triggered this. Something was triggered. So Catherine opens up her nightstand. She takes out her butcher knife. And then she proceeds to stab John 37 times. And according to blood evidence, it seemed that John definitely tried to fight back and he tried to make a run for it, but eventually he passed away. After killing John, she then took a bunch of pills, laid down, and I think she tried to kill herself or she was just putting on a show for police. We don't really know. The next day, John's co-workers, took his word for it. He didn't show up for work that day. They were like, John said if he doesn't come to work, to call the police because Catherine killed him. So John doesn't show up for work and his coworkers, being great people, call the police. Police go to the house. They're gonna go do a check, see what's going on. Now, police knock at the door. They're not getting an answer. They see that John's truck is there, so obviously he's home. They knock, nobody's answering. So then they look through the little peephole. Not the peephole, where they put the mail slot. Yes. They look through the mail slot just to see if they can see anything. The police reported that all he could see was a big curtain hanging and it was blocking his view. So after no response, the police go inside of the home and they proceed inside. So they're walking towards this big curtain. The other police officer thought it was a big blanket that was kind of covering the way. They could automatically see when they walked in, there's just blood everywhere, right? So they know something went down in here, okay? They're walking towards this curtain. The police pushes the curtain aside so they proceed into the room. So he uses his left arm to push it aside. The police looks down and realizes his whole arm is covered in blood. So he looks at this curtain that he just pushed aside. He looks at the curtain. He realizes it's not a curtain. This is serious. He looks and he realizes it's not a curtain. Nay. It's skin hanging from the door frame. Just skin. Then he looks down on the ground and sees a torso on the ground. No head. Side note, I know a police officer is supposed to be, brave and strong, but any of us would have ran out of there so quick, screaming. Hell no. That's something you would just see in a movie, not real life. So the officer keeps walking and sees that there's blood all over the walls, just splattered everywhere. Floor was covered in blood. Then the officers walk into the kitchen and they see plates of food being prepared, there was vegetables, there was meat cooked. They searched the house, they went upstairs into the hallway, and then they heard someone snoring. Bitch, run, But they didn't. Catherine was on the bed sleeping. Police officers tried to wake her up, but she wasn't responding. They then picked her up, carried her outside, and put her on the back lawn. So police go back into the home, and then that's when they start to just see more that they didn't want to see. So they realized that the skin was hanging from butcher's hooks on the door frame. Just skin. John's head, because his torso was on the ground and there was no head. They found his head and it was cooking in a stew in the kitchen. So it was on the stove. John's head was on the stove. Forensic investigators show up to the house and instantly they notice a sweet smell. But it's that sweet smell as if it's a body, I guess. Anyway, so they walk into the house and instantly they notice the flesh, the skin hanging from the meat hooks in the doorway. So forensic investigators determined that based off of the blood spatters, again, blood spatters tell a lot. More than I thought. Based off the blood spatters, they could tell that, okay, John was on the bed, right? Catherine stabbed him a shit ton of times. John then tried to get up, make a run for it. So he gets up off of the bed and there's blood on the light switch. So they were like, okay, so he must have been reaching for the light switch. They then notice down the hallway that there's blood swipes down the hallway. So they see, okay, so he's trying to run down the hallway. As it proceeded downwards, they noticed that the blood spatters were getting lower and lower. So John was slowly falling downwards, probably because he's getting weaker and weaker. Then they noticed that the front door had blood on the screen, so John made it to the front door. But then they saw on the ground that there was like this dragging motion of blood, so Catherine must have grabbed him and then dragged him back to wherever she was going with it. In the lounge room, that's where the torso was found, and that's where like the biggest pool of blood was. So I guess Catherine just laid him on the ground. That's where she skinned him. And at first I was like, dang, how'd she know how to skin him? Well, back when she was skinning the animals and stuff in the butcher place, that's where she learned her little tricks, I guess. So she skinned John, and then she took his skin off and she placed it onto the carpet like next to her. And then they know that the head was still on the body when he was on the ground, because there was like an outline on the carpet or the floor of where his head was. Forensic investigators assumed, okay, well, she then cut his head off and then she carried it to the kitchen, because there were blood stains now leading into the kitchen where they assumed she carried his head. It's like hard to believe, honestly. It just sounds like something from a movie, right? Like, what? I made the mistake of looking up the images. So then in the kitchen is where she cut a big piece of muscle from his back, so like your big back muscle. She cut that into 5 separate pieces, like 5 little mini steaks. And then she cooked it in the oven, 350 degrees, for about 45 minutes. They saw that she had 4 plates made, and then the dog outside had the 5th piece of meat that she had cut up. So then they also noticed that there were, what's it called? Table settings? Table was made because she was gonna have dinner guests over. So there was little nameplates, and it was all the nameplates of their children. So Catherine was planning on, I guess, having people over and feeding them their own father. Did she think that people were going to come over and not notice like the blood everywhere? That's a crazy, I don't want to know. So police investigators obviously took all of the items in the house that had blood on it, looked like it had been touched, looked like she had used as evidence. So police investigators were saying, because this is the timeline that they put together, once she killed John, she then took a shower, she changed, she then took John's wallet, and she ran to do some errands. And they know this because at 12 a.m., John's bank card was used to take money out. They're assuming it was Catherine, that she took his card and she took out $1,000. What she planned to do with the money, nobody knows. They ended up never finding the money that she took out, so they assumed that she took out this money and then she buried it somewhere. So she was going to go back and get the money. But they never found it. So Catherine was immediately detained, and she was in a coma, I believe, for 5 days. So they couldn't interview her until she woke up. And of course, once she woke up and she was being interviewed, she had no memory of what happened before. They never do. The whole interview, she just wasn't giving anything away. She does eventually accept the fact that she killed John. She claimed that she killed him due to the long string of abuse that she was receiving from John throughout their relationship. They never get like a clear story from her, like what happened, but she does admit that she killed him. Catherine's brother said that she told him she was going to kill John and get away with it because she was going to act crazy, which is exactly what she proceeded to do. Catherine originally in court pled not guilty, and then midway through the court trial, she ended up changing her plea to guilty, but she didn't give any reason as to why she did that. Nothing at all. She just was like, I want to change it, and she changed it to guilty. The judge was nervous about that because he knew exactly what she was going to try and do. She was going to appeal the case, saying that she pled guilty because she was insane at the time when she pled guilty. So she was just going to say that she was not in the right mental state to plead guilty. So she's like, she just knew what she was doing. She's a pretty smart cookie. Give her that. Psychiatrists actually ended up doing an evaluation on her and determined that she was definitely in her right mind, that she was not mentally unstable like she was saying she was. What kind of test they gave her, I don't know. I think we can all agree that she was mentally ill, because who in the right mind would do that, right? But, nay, you should not get off lightly for that, because that is disturbing. Throughout court, she did not show any type of emotion. She was just like, then out of nowhere, she randomly started acting crazy. She would start screaming at the top of her lungs, rocking back and forth, trying to portray this, nah, I'm sick, which she's never done this throughout her entire life. So people knew that she was just acting. She just wanted to manipulate the situation. And the judge knew that. He was really smart. And there was an interview on YouTube that I watched where he was like breaking it all down. And he just knew exactly what she was doing. The judge determined that she would get life in prison without the possibility of parole. And she's the first woman in Australia to get a life sentence with no chance of parole. So good for you, Catherine. No one fully knows what took place that night because Catherine still to this day has not talked about it. And no one knows what she did with the money. What did she do when she left the house? What the hell was she doing? What? In 2006, Catherine did apply to appeal. She claimed that her life sentence was too severe for her crime. She did. Obviously rejected this appeal and said, no, Catherine. No, but judges said, this is the worst thing we've ever seen in our lives, pretty much. Psychologists have examined Catherine, determined that killing and dismembering John was premeditated and an act of revenge. Plus, it just got her off on her perverted pleasure. Catherine really enjoyed. She's just a sick, sick lady. In prison, Catherine attends church on a regular basis and she sings in a women's choir. I was reading different articles about Catherine, in jail, and they're saying she's the boss bitch around there pretty much, that everybody listens to her. She calls the shots. And I don't know if she'll ever come clean about what she did that night. And that concludes the story about Catherine Knight. So I think we can all agree that Catherine was not well. And poor John, his life was taken from him because of Catherine. I don't know why she was that way. I don't think any of us will really know why she was that way. So let me know what you think down below. There's really not much you can say other than what the F. I don't know what the takeaway is with this because I felt like John did everything that he was supposed to do. He told his friends, he told his boss, he told his family what was going on with Catherine. He tried to get the police involved, and it's never a smooth process with going to the police and whatnot. And I think that's all I have to say. I hope that you have a great day today. Make good choices. Don't go murdering anybody, okay? And don't go eating them. I don't think you should do that. I will see you guys later. Bye. Issei Sagawa. Have you heard of him? Yeah. You have? Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. Well, if you haven't, this guy was a total dork. He was born April 26, 1949, so he's a Taurus. You know how for the most part, most of these killers and these bad people, their upbringing is so awful, so horrible. And it kind of, I don't want to say it makes sense as to why they turned out the way they did, but it kind of does. You know what I'm saying? But Issei is that opposite person where it's how? I don't know. So, Issei, he was born into a wealthy family, a very well-off family. They were living in Japan, very traditional, but very loving. That's great for him. His father was very successful. He was a businessman. He was president of a water industries, and he made a lot of money, and he was doing very well, okay? Also, Issei's grandfather, he was an editor for one of the major newspapers in Japan. And his mother, Issei's mother, she took care of the family. She was the stay-at-home mom. So they're doing great. financially. That doesn't mean everything else is great, but you know. When Issei's mother was pregnant with him, she actually fell down like a flight of stairs and she almost miscarried Issei. And it was said that he was born prematurely and like he was so small he could fit into the palm of his father's hand. He had a younger brother who was born 2 years after him, but they were very close and they almost raised them like twins. When Issei was a baby, he developed enteritis, which is a disease of the small intestine. And to treat this, the doctors would inject potassium and calcium into his body, which led to Issei eventually recovering. But the downside was that the disease was leaving him very like frail and just sickly looking, which made him feel very insecure. It was said because of this, Issei was more of an introvert. He was a bit of a loner in school. He didn't really have like any friends, but he absolutely loved school, especially literature, because it was a way for him to escape the world that he was in and go on like these grand adventures in his imagination, you know, where like he wasn't the small little guy or he wasn't the weak, sickly guy. He could be the hero of the story using his imagination. So he loved reading. He loved books, stories, literature, like I said. Because of this, he would end up getting his master's degree in English literature. Issei would say that from a young age, he noticed that something within himself from a very early age was going on. Like something was different. Issei would, in a later interview, would say that when growing up, his uncle would come over to the house and they would play a game where like his uncle would dress up as a scary boy-eating giant and he would chase the kids around the house pretending he was gonna put them in a big pot and cook them and then eat them. Which, okay, sure, you know, fine. But where this story goes, it's like, oh shit, you know? But okay, great game. But the uncle would chase Issei and his brother around, and then his father would like rescue them. And it was just all fun and games. There was like nothing, no bad shenanigans going on. But Issei would say like this game, it was more than a game for him. It was like this awakening. He remembers having like a mixture of terror and excitement while playing this game. I mean, it was thrilling to him. Issei would say that this just was one of those moments that just stuck in his life, you know? And he would say that at that very moment, that's when he just really became fascinated with stories and fairy tales about monsters and dragons, especially when they involved eating people. So with that being said, of course, Hansel and Gretel was one of his favorites. I don't remember Hansel and Gretel, to be quite honest with you. I remember they lived in a candy house, but did they get eaten? It's been so long. Did they get eaten? That's a little fucked up. What was that all about? We read that as kids? Are we okay? Issei and his brother said that they grew up in a very tame home, a very loving home, a very normal home. One thing, though, the family never talked about sex. Sex was just something nobody talked about, okay? So this thing happened when Issei got his first boner, his first boner. He at first said that he thought he was seriously ill. He's like, oh my God, something's wrong with me. Like, this isn't normal. Like, he freaked out. He didn't know what was going on. And you know, there's no internet or anything back then. So what do you do? Again, since he has no sex education, he doesn't know that you can fiddle your diddle. You know what I'm saying? So he doesn't know that that's like an option. But he has this thing and he's feeling like these weird feelings. And Issei said it led him into participating in some very questionable acts. For example, like having the family dog lick his, I don't know what he's doing, but he did that. I know. Why did he bring the dog into this? I don't know, but he did. Issei said, again, because he's pretty young when he's doing this, he's experimenting. And Issei said that like when this happened, his sexual desires started to become more distorted. You know, I wonder why. So as Issei gets older, he only gets weirder, okay? In first grade, he said that he saw something that just got his motor running. Again, he's in first grade, okay? he found one of his classmates like very attractive. So the fellow classmate is wearing shorts, as one does when it's hot outside. And he remembered looking at this girl in her shorts and thinking to himself, man, that is a delicious looking thigh. I want to bite it. Now remember, Issei is in first grade. That means he's like 6 or 7 years old. And, you know, for someone who is 6 or 7 years old, that's a little different. As time went on, Issei was growing more and more aware of like his fantasies of eating thighs and how it just wasn't normal. And at the age of 15, he did try to seek help from a psychologist, but when he found out like that he needed to go in person and that he actually like needed help, it was serious, he never went. I guess he just like couldn't bring himself to actually tell his parents that he needed help, so he just never said anything and he never went to therapy. His parents never came out and said anything on record about their son, so it's really unclear if they knew what was going on in his head or if they even knew that he needed help. I doubt it. They just don't seem like they talked at all. Like, yeah, they showed love, but I don't think they're like, hey, how's your day today? So it's 1964 and Issei is 24 years old. At this time, he's studying at the University of Tokyo when he sees a tall, beautiful German woman. She's like walking in the street and he's just feeling very attracted to her. Most people would be like, oh, you know, I wonder how I could like get to know her. She's so beautiful. I want to talk to her and just like get to know them like a normal person. But Issei, as you've probably learned, he really isn't like most people. So instead of thinking to himself like, how can I talk to her? He's thinking to himself like, I wonder if I could get close to her so I can eat her. So one summer, he decides to lean into those dark feelings, those dark desires he was having, and see where it leads him. I'm laughing because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to think like you could be walking, minding your own business, and someone's thinking about eating you. Like, what a bummer. Anyway, so he was kind of like following this girl. I guess he would see her from time to time, like taking the same train and whatnot. And so he decides to just follow her home one night, okay? And he's waiting outside of her apartment and he's waiting to see like her lights go off. So once he knows that this woman has gone to bed, he decides to break in through her window and sees that she's laying in bed, sleeping, naked. Oh, he's feeling real jazzed. He's like, this is my moment. This is it. He's given so many interviews, so it's like you can hear it directly from him. But he said that he didn't want to kill her. He just wanted to take a bite of her bottom, her bum. Yeah, like she's not going to know or something. Anyways, he's looking for something heavy around to like knock the woman out with. The first thing he sees, an umbrella. Sure, that's going to work. So he grabs the umbrella. Goes up to her bed. He's like leaning over her, right? And I guess he kind of like brushed up against her or something. But she wakes up and she starts screaming, as any of us would do. Issei is a very, very like small man. And so anyone over like 5'2" can take him down. And that's what she did. She wakes up. She starts screaming at him. She grabs his arm. She throws him to the ground. And then she calls police. You go, girl. So the woman ends up calling police and Issei was arrested, right? And he was being charged with attempted rape. If only they knew what his real goal was, you know? But of course, he's not going to tell them that he was going to do that. He's like, sure, I was going to rape her. Sounds about right. Well, like I mentioned earlier, Issei's father was super wealthy. And when he finds out that his son was in trouble, he pays a large unknown settlement to the victim and the charges end up being dropped. I think it's safe to say that Issei, he didn't learn a damn thing, right? Like, thanks, daddy. I mean, good for the girl. She got a large settlement, but you know, he should have to pay the price. Teach him a goddamn lesson, but he doesn't. So after that failed attempt, Issei's desires didn't just go away. Nay. In fact, they just got stronger and more persistent. He knew he had to eat a woman. This was his one dream in life, and he needed to fulfill it in order to be happy. Dream big, they say. Dream big. So then Issei ends up going on a vacation, a little holiday, and he goes on like a cruise to Greece. And while he's on this cruise, he meets like a butcher. And he's like super interested into this guy. And this guy's like, oh, okay, like, let me tell you about my job. Issei's like, what's it like being a butcher? You know, what do you use to cut the meat with? Is there a certain technique? You know, he's just trying to get Butcher Basics 101. And the butcher, he's feeling very flattered that someone is so interested in his profession. And he stays with Issei for a good amount of time, explaining how to butcher meat. Issei plays it all cool, like, yeah, thanks, I want to become a butcher one day, you know? But secretly, he was taking notes, knowing that he was going to probably most likely apply them to cutting up people meat and not so much cow or whatever. I'm sure if the butcher knew then what we know now, you know, this would have never happened. And, okay, I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit because this part just, it's so upsetting because, okay, so Issei does terrible things, which we're going to get into. But Issei writes a letter to this butcher telling him, thank you so much for taking the time to explain to me, like, how to do all this, blah, blah, blah. And by this point, it was his story, Issei's story was pretty well known. The butcher never responded to his letter. But I just thought, wow, that's super effed up. Because now that guy, the butcher, has to live with that for the rest of his life. Like, I told this person how to cut meat, and he applied it towards actual people. Like, that's just so fucked up. Is that not? I literally was like, I would be livid. So then in 1981, Issei, he graduates from college and he ends up moving to France to pursue a PhD in comparative literature at Sorbonne University, which is like a very fancy smancy university, I hear. Don't know, but I've heard that. So when he moves to like a Latin quarter of Paris, France, an area which is super known for like its student life. It's very lively, lots of people, bistros. Issei is kind of getting adjusted to this new life of his. And he would say that every night, almost every night, he would go out and he would bring a sex worker like back home with him. And instead of paying them for, you know, some sweet lovin', he would wait for the moment when they had like their backs towards him and he would try to shoot them. Like he was trying to kill somebody. But luckily, I guess, he would freeze and he'd chicken out. So he couldn't do it, but he was trying to get some practice in. So time goes on. And in one of his classes, he meets a woman named Renee, and he immediately falls in love with her. Renee Hartfelt was 25 years old, and she was also studying to get her PhD in French literature. She was originally from Holland, and it was said that Renee was like 5'10". She was just tall, stunning, super smart, and she spoke 3 languages. So again, Issei meets Renee in one of his classes, and he's like friendly with her, whatever, and he asks her that, or he goes up to her and he says that he's looking for someone to help him study German because he's struggling. He asked Renee like, hey, would you be open to teaching me? He then went on to tell Renee that he had a very wealthy father who could pay for her to help him and just pay her for her time. Renee was friendly with Issei, and she agreed to help him with his German, and over time, the two of them formed like a little friendship. Issei was really smart, and he enjoyed Renee's company because she was also really smart too, and Renee liked that about him. They bonded. They had a lot in common. They had a lot of common interest. So Issei is in love with Renee and thought she was absolutely beautiful. He even started to write her love letters, and he would invite her to different art exhibits or concerts. And Renee saw him as a good friend. She agreed to go out dancing with him from time to time because she just enjoyed his company. In a letter Renee wrote to her parents back at home, she said that she found Issei friendly and intellectual. What I'm getting at is like they were friends. They seemed, friends. But I think that's the problem. Renee saw him as just that, a great friend, great company. She enjoyed him as just that. And Issei's love for Renee is just growing. He is wanting more than just being friends. He wants to do more than just wine and dine her. He wants to wine and dine her, if you catch my drift. He wants to eat her. So Issei would later explain that one of the reasons he really wanted to eat Renee was because she was healthy and beautiful, two characteristics he felt that he lacked. And he considered himself weak, ugly, small. He wanted to absorb her energy through eating her, I guess. That's his mind. I don't know, dude. I don't freaking know, you guys, but that's his reasoning. But he knew in order to eat her, he has to kill her first, which is something that he seems to be struggling with. He said in interviews that if Renee would have allowed him to drink her urine or would have given her some of her pubic hairs, that alone might have satisfied his desires, but he was too afraid to ask in the first place. So killing her in his mind was easier than asking her for her urine and pubic hairs. Either way, it's awkward, man. What was he gonna do with the urine? Ew. So one evening, Issei invited Renee over for dinner, and he was asking her to read him a poem by one of his favorite German writers. And she was like, oh, okay, sure, because German, they're learning, remember? So she sits down at his desk and she's reading him the poem. Issei, he had a rifle hidden in his drawers on the other side of the room. And there are different reports that say Issei actually tried to shoot Renee this night when she wasn't paying attention, but that the gun ended up jamming. And I guess Renee didn't hear it or even have any idea that it happened behind her back because she was like sitting reading. And Issei just pretends that nothing happened, I guess. So Renee took off for the night. She's like, bye, whatever. She has no idea what Issei's really thinking. And he went just full-blown creep status 100 and just went off. When you're really into someone and the scent of like their cologne or perfume, it kind of lingers after they leave and you're like, oh my God, like it smells like them. But nothing more than that. Like not in a creepy way. You're just like, oh my God, just me. No, that's normal. Whatever. Well, it was kind of like that. Issei was doing that, but it was to the 100th degree. Issei said that evening when Renee left, he smelled the chair where she had been sitting. And he's trying to sniff up all of her scent. And then he even went as far as to licking the chair she sat in. Issei wanted Renee all to himself. And he made a little promise with himself that he was going to eat her, which would allow him to possess her forever. On June 11th, 1981, Issei invites Renee over for dinner again. This time he told Renee that he had a cassette recorder and he wanted to record her reading the poem aloud. That way he could like practice or whatever. So she's like, okay, sure, sounds good. Poor thing. And she goes over to Issei's house that evening. Renee arrives to Issei's house, right? Great. So he welcomes her in. They sit down on the floor. He offers her some tea, but what I guess Renee didn't know was that he spiked her tea with whiskey. Now, I couldn't get clarification, though, if she did know or if she didn't know. I feel like he would taste it, but I'm going to say maybe she didn't know because there was no straight answer, and let's not assume. Anyways, so he spikes her tea with whiskey, and they're just sitting on the floor, and they're chatting, and Issei, he's waiting for the alcohol to kick in, for Renee to be a little bit more loose, a little bit more relaxed. And then after some time passes and he notices that Renee does seem a little bit more relaxed, that's when he uses this opportunity to confess his love for her. And he tells Renee that he wants to take her to bed for some, winky dinky. And he's telling her that over time he's been having all these emotions and feelings for her and thinks she's wonderful, X, Y, and Z. You get it. Now, at this moment, I guess this was a shock to Renee because she had making it clear that they were friends and she was taken aback and she was like, oh dear, oh no, I am busy around that time you were thinking about doing that. I'm so sorry. I thought we were just friends. She went on to tell Issei, I really appreciate your friendship and I just want nothing more than that. And she's just trying to be really polite and not piss him off, right? But she's bummed, I guess, because this is the That's the moment your friendship is kind of over. Issei responds by saying that he understands. And he's like, well, let's just get to the poetry though. So he gets up, he gets the book of poetry he wanted her to read, hands it to her. She sits back down at his desk and he starts a tape recorder. So when she's sitting at Issei's desk, her back is faced towards him, like she's facing a window. And Renee begins reading the poem. Well, Issei has his gun ready. He comes up behind her slowly with a .22 caliber rifle in his hand. Bang, bang, he shoots her in the neck. I guess there was like a brief moment where Renee kept reading the poem before she fell into the floor, dead. And the whole thing was being recorded. Issei said after he shot Renee, she falls to the ground and then he like fell into shock himself and then he fainted. So they're just like, get it together, guy. Okay, if you're gonna do this, you can't be fainting, freaking loser. So then he comes back to. And when he comes back to, he is like, great. I get to like carry out my original plan. Now's my chance. I get to eat Renee. I mean, he had no other choice now. He already followed through for step one. Issei said that he laid a towel under her head and then he undressed her and he had everything planned out in his mind, like knowing which part he was going to start eating first. I don't know. He seemed to have like an obsession with eating the booty. I don't know how else to put that because like that's what he really wanted to do. He wanted to take a big old chomp into her butt and he wanted to start with her right cheek first. It's kind of ironic, I guess, but he didn't like blood and he feared that the left cheek would be more bloody since it's closer to the heart. So, okay, all right, sure, LOL. So while following his dreams, Issei notices that his teeth are not sharp enough to penetrate someone's skin. He's like, oh dear, like I didn't think about this. So he's like, oh my God, fruit knife. I have a fruit knife in the kitchen. Let me go get that. So he goes to get the fruit knife. He comes back. He's trying to cut her with that. But again, that wasn't sharp enough either. So he goes back to his kitchen. He's just looking for any kind of tool that will be sharp enough to help him out here. And he's got nothing. So he decides to make a quick little trip to the store where he purchases a curved meat knife. So he gets the curved meat knife, comes back, it works. And he proceeds to cut Renee's body up, starting with her butt. He's a booty guy, I guess. So Issei proceeds to eat parts of Renee's body, mostly focusing on her boobage, her butt, and her face. And he was kind of experimenting a little bit. He would either cook the meat or he would try it raw. He would try with different sauces, mustard, ketchup, vinaigrette, whatever you use, butter. Issei in interviews said that he was surprised at the corn-colored nature of human fat, and he found the meat soft and odorless, and it melted in his mouth like raw tuna. Specific, but if you were curious, now you know. He said a lot more, but we don't need to go into super graphic details. You get the gist of it. He fried some of the meat and he tried baking different parts, but he didn't like the greasy consistency that he was getting a lot of the times. He just was experimenting with different techniques on how to eat the human meat. So during all of this, he's cutting Renee's body up, and Issei said that he was getting really excited, if you know what I mean. He was getting a boner. And just during this whole process, he tells Renee that he loves her for the first time. And it's just like, dude, get a fucking grip. What are you doing? He said that night he brought Renee, her body, into bed with him and like slept with her, cuddled, knowing that the next day he was probably going to have to dispose of her body because most likely like flies and stuff would come around. But Issei was excited because the next day he realized that there were no flies just yet. and her body hasn't seemed to have gone bad. There was no like weird smell. There was no flies. So it still must be good. And he's like, fuck yeah, I get another day to experiment. So he goes on to cut up, again, her skin, her body. He's sampling different parts of her. And he upgraded to an electric carving knife at this point. I'm sorry for laughing, but what are you doing? Yes, he's got an electric carving knife. Like he's like, I'm gonna go upgrade really quick. He gets an electric carving knife, cuts up the rest of her body. He's putting them in Ziploc little baggies, putting them in the fridge for later, right? Saving it for snacks or something. And then during each stage of dismembering the body, he took photographs of each process to keep for his scrapbook, I guess, memories. But soon enough, the flies showed up. And once the flies came and started to swarm around the body, he knew it was time to get rid of it. It was done. It was over. So in order to get rid of the body, the evidence, poor Renee, so he's like, let me just chop her up into smaller pieces, and I'll shove her in these 2 suitcases I have. So he does just that. Of course, along the way, cutting her up further to fit into these suitcases, he's sampling and taking bites of different parts that didn't have any flies on them. So Issei came up with a plan. His plan was to put Renee's body into the 2 suitcases and then take it down to the local lake and drop them in the lake, hoping it would sink and never be found again. So with this in mind, Issei, he packs up, he loads the 2 suitcases, and he calls up a cab, and he asks them to take them to a public park, which is like 5 miles from the city center of Paris. It's like the second largest park in Paris. It's about almost 3 times the size of Central Park in New York. And this park has like several gardens, several lakes. There's even a zoo and an amusement park. Everyone goes there and like hangs out. And it's not like a quiet place to go where nobody's gonna see you execute this awful plan. But that's his idea. So it's around 8 p.m. and Issei calls up a cab driver to come pick him up and take him down to the park. When the cab driver picks him up, he helps Issei out with the 2 suitcases he brought. And the driver even made a comment to Issei, joking like, what is there, a body in here or something? Literally just joking because the suitcases were so heavy. And you know, when you're making small talk like that, you say something stupid like, what do you got, a dead body in here? 1 out of every 1,000 times, it may just be the case. But I guess Issei just kind of laughed awkwardly and said like, no, it's full of books. I have tons of books in these suitcases. The suitcases were super heavy though, so when Issei was dropped off at the park, he was trying to carry these suitcases, and people are just kind of staring at him at the lake, just watching this small, scrawny man struggling with these 2 heavy suitcases. He's like dragging them down to the lake like a little weirdo, you know? So a lot of people are just sitting there kind of watching, minding their own business, but they're like, he's like, you know, what is this guy doing? Because the park was a very popular spot, Issei didn't think about how crowded it would be. Even though it was late, there was like a lot of people there, and he was feeling very overwhelmed trying to drag these suitcases around because he felt like everyone was staring at him, which they were, so he wasn't wrong. Eventually, he said he found like a little quiet place where there wasn't that many people around, and he starts pushing the suitcases down towards the lake, towards the water. But he got to a point where he was really exhausted, so he suitcases are on the ground, took a break, and just kind of walks a little bit forward, and he's admiring the really pretty sunset. Mind you, his suitcases are kind of like back behind him a little bit. And then he hears someone shouting behind him. It's a man. It's an older man. He's hanging out at the park, and he saw the 2 suitcases. And he thought like somebody had left them or forgotten them. He saw Issei standing not far. And he's like, hey man, are these your suitcases? And Issei said he thought about saying yes, but he wanted the man to just go away. So instead he said no and just walked away, which I feel like that wasn't the right move. So he just walks away. So the man who asked Issei, like, hey, are these your bags? He's super curious. He's like, who left these, 2 suitcases here? Let me open them up. Maybe there's $1 million in there. So the man, he opens up the suitcases and he sees something like a bloody bed sheet that I guess Issei had wrapped Renee's body in. But he just sees like a bloody bed sheet and then he screams, murder! Like really loud. So everyone in the park is looking over like, what the hell is going on? Like what? Because this man seems very upset, as one would be, Issei, he didn't even flinch. He just kept walking. He just aborted mission, walked back, headed straight to his apartment as fast as he could without drawing any attention to himself. So police were obviously called out to the scene and they investigate the suitcases and ask the witnesses at the park like what they saw. Multiple people reported seeing a small Asian man pushing the suitcases down to the end of the lake, but that's really the only information anyone had. So the suitcases were taken to the local mortuary where they were fully unpacked and the gruesome scene began to tell its story. They discovered the gunshot wound at the nape of the neck, and portions of her flesh seemed to be missing. Photographs were taken of the body for evidence reports, but sadly, they would not stay contained within the police files. Somehow, somebody with greedy intentions, it was someone working on the inside, they took those photos and they sold them to like a popular French magazine, which led to them being published all over. But it is a horrifying scene. They haven't seen anything like this, and it's obvious to them, like, it looks like somebody ate this, So they're they don't know what to do with this. It wouldn't take long for investigators to find Issei, though. Police reached out to local cab companies asking if any of the drivers had a client that maybe had some really heavy suitcases, Well, sure enough, one of the drivers came forward and said like, hey, I had a client, just yesterday who I picked up who had some really heavy suitcases. And shortly after that, Issei was arrested. So police go and arrest Issei, and I guess lucky for them, Issei didn't even try to pretend like he was innocent. The cops came in, they arrested him, and he just confessed like that. They were like, hey, you're under arrest for murder. And his response was, I killed her to eat her flesh. So, case closed, great, we got a confession. After being arrested for Renee's murder, Issei's daddy once again came to his rescue, paying for a top defense lawyer. Despite there being multiple eyewitnesses, evidence found in Issei's apartment, and his confession to the crime, he was locked up, put away for 2 years. He was waiting for trial. And then the judge found Issei legally insane and unfit to stand trial. So the charges were dropped. The French courts sentenced Issei to be held indefinitely, aka forever, in a mental institution though. So, at least he'll be locked up there and maybe get some help. During this time, Renee's parents never spoke to the media. And on the other hand, Issei, like his parents were paying for anything that had to do with the legal side of things. And then both of the parents, they didn't talk to media, but they also shielded their son, Issei, from the public eye. They just really protected him and just paid for everything. Issei's brother actually showed public support, but it turns out like he's also an interesting case all on his own. He did an interview for Forbes, and Issei's brother said that he himself had his own urges that he kept to himself. Like he didn't tell anyone about it. And not even Issei knew about his urges himself. He wanted to eat people too, is what I'm getting at. His brother said in an interview that he'll probably die not knowing why he had these feelings, or if there's anyone else there, like out there like him. But Issei was quick to like turn down his brother's comments, I guess. He would publicly say like, oh, my brother, his thoughts are not as bad as my thoughts. I'm way worse than he is. And it was like some really weird competitive, I'm a better cannibal than you are. I don't know. It was very strange, but there seems to be some kind of competition going on. Issei was sent to a mental institution and a Japanese author came by to visit. He wanted to write a story and then wanted to get Issei's account of his crime. So this author went out and interviewed him for his book. It was later called In the Fog, which included Issei's account of his kill. And it would go on to sell like over 200,000 copies. And this book, it also featured all of the horrifying photos that no one should have seen. Now, because of this book, the attention Issei was getting was widespread and he was becoming a big media sensation. Everyone just wanted to know, like, what, huh? You know, the curious cats that we are, just trying to figure it out. Now, the French were not too excited about this because they were receiving a lot of negative publicity because Issei was technically still in France. So, because they didn't like all this negative press they were getting, they decided it would be best to deport him back to Japan. So Issei was sent to a hospital in Tokyo, and the psychologists, they're examining him, and they declare him to be sane, but evil. And his sexual perversion was his only motivation for murder. Does that mean Issei goes back to jail and court and all that? No. Nay. Japanese authorities did try to put him on trial for murder, but the charges got dropped, and the French refused to hand over the necessary court documents. So there was like no evidence for a trial in Japan. And without any evidence linking Issei to Renee's murder, the Japanese courts, they were unable to keep Issei further. It doesn't make any sense. He was literally held for 15 months, and then because the French authorities didn't hand over the documents, they couldn't charge him with anything. And I was trying to understand why that happened. I really was, but I don't know. I don't know why they wouldn't hand over the documents. So after 15 months of being held, he was able to check himself out of the hospital on August 12th, 1986. Free to just live his life. Okay. So the response in Japan was a lot different than the response in France. And his crime, it kind of made him a cultural icon in Japan, I guess. And Issei, he didn't shy away from it. He embraced it. Anyways, a Japanese magazine called Murder in Mind asked Issei to write an article about the murder he committed, which again led to more media attention and outrage. So over the years following Renee's murder, Issei's crime continued to catch people's interest. Even a verse in the Rolling Stones song, Too Much Blood, they make a little shout out to Issei. It was inspired by him. His fame kept him busy writing books, a comic book with graphic illustrations of his crime, and making countless guest speaker, commentator, and talk show appearances. He was like just really milking it. I mean, again, it was a way for him to make his money. I don't know if I'm mad at him or like, I don't blame you. Anyways, he even appeared in several movies and documentaries. Issei had a small part in a sexploitation film playing a sadomasochistic voyeur, and he was getting a lot of porn offers, to be quite honest with you. Like there was another one where a producer asked Issei to participate in a movie where they had him doing really weird things, like they would measure his strength while they were making fun of him, like a humiliation fetish. Issei also took a role in a porno where he and his co-star, they lived together in an apartment for like 24 hours and they would have sex. It seemed kind of like a reality porn show. Issei then asked the co-star, like, hey, can I drink your urine and your spit? Very odd, but I guess some are into it. But then plot freaking twist, after the two of them participate in sexual relations, Issei reveals to the co-star, about his past. He tells her that he is a cannibal, and he shares his autobiography with her, showing her photos of what he had done to his victim, Renee. And all of this is being filmed. And again, it's kind of like reality. So you're getting this girl's true response to the situation, and the co-star is just in like severe shock, and she starts crying. Later in life, the two of them, Issei and the co-star, they actually became like real life friends, and Issei said that she would help him like curb his cannibalistic desires by having this friendship, I guess. I don't know, the whole thing is very odd. Yeah, that's really all I could say about that. You know, as time went on, attention around Issei died down a bit. And then in 2009, Issei sat down and gave an interview with Vice magazine. And he said that, well, he might not be in jail. Trying to make a living while being a known murderer and cannibal was just a terrible punishment. Woo-hoo. In addition to royalties he was receiving from books and interview fees, he also did reviews for different restaurants. I guess that's fitting. In a way, I don't know. And then Issei, he picked up painting in his free time, and he was focusing painting on women's nude bodies, and he even sold like a number of them in order to help pay for some of his bills. Issei seemed to be kind of scraping by, and in the interview you could tell he wants you to feel bad for him, but I'm not sure what you expect or what he expects. We don't feel bad for you. I think you should be in prison, bro. Sorry. Yeah, I really think you should be locked up. During this Vice interview, they're asking him like, hey, are you a changed man? You know, have you changed your ways? Have you at least, I mean, you're one lucky guy, right? You literally murdered and ate someone and you're walking free? The chances of that happening are slim to none. Have you curbed your desires to eat people? And then Issei said, no. That even on his way to the train station that day of the interview, he saw a girl with really nice legs, and he was thinking about wanting to eat someone again before he died. So over the years, Issei has just existed, really. He's been living outside of Tokyo. In 2013, he was hospitalized because he had something going on in his brain where there was like no oxygen or blood flow getting to his brain, and it permanently damaged his nervous system. So he lives alone, he's confined to a wheelchair, and he requires daily assistance from either caregivers or from his younger brother. He also had problems with his stomach area, so he can't even eat normal food. He has to eat through a feeding tube. But his newest goal in life, you are probably wondering, well, it's to be killed slowly and painfully, but most of all by a beautiful woman, if possible. Dream big, they say. Dream big. Poor Renee, not only was she murdered, eaten, but the photos of her remains were shared with a lot of people, you know? And then the guy who murders her, he wasn't even, really punished at all for his crime. I just think it's safe to say, like, he didn't learn a damn thing from it. How do we know he didn't do it again? We don't. He probably did it again. We don't know. I wish this one had a happier ending, but I guess it's kind of comforting knowing that, like, Issei is confined to his wheelchair and can't do any more damage unless he has help. But then again, if his younger brother is working with him, I don't know, because he seemed a little off as well. You know, is someone watching them? Is anyone paying attention to those brothers? Let's hope. That, my friends, is the story of Issei Sagawa. He is gross. He's gross. Like, ew. Ugh. If you watch any of the interviews with him, ugh. But other than that, I love how this makeup look came out. Thank you so much. Look at, ooh, Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I love and appreciate you guys so much. Oh, let me know who you want me to talk about next week. But other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. You make good choices, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye. Today, we are going to the heart of Bradford, England. Oh, yes. It was a city once known for its rich history and industrious spirit, where a sinister shadow lurked around. Stephen Griffiths. Do you know him? Well, let me tell you, he was a PhD student and a criminology scholar, and he harbored a very dark secret. Now, the year 2009, women began disappearing without a trace. They were just vanishing into the night. But it wasn't until the disturbing discovery in the murky waters of the River Aire that the true horror began to surface. Well, who was this Stephen Griffiths guy, and what drove him to commit such heinous acts? And how did he even evade suspicion for as long as he did? Well, that, my friends, is where I'm going to tell you everything, because this man was something else. Stephen Sean Griffiths was born on Christmas Eve, kind of cute, on December 24th, 1969, in Dewsbury, West Riding of Yorkshire, England. I know, a name, West Riding of Yorkshire, England. So I guess his father, I don't know, some people said he was a fisherman, some said that he was a frozen food salesman, but either way, that was his dad. He was working a lot. His mother was Moira de Worst, which is kind of funny because she is de Worst. Get it? No? Okay. Moira, she was a phone switchboard operator. So back in the day, switchboard operators, they would connect calls by inserting a pair of phone plugs into the appropriate jacks. Stephen, he had two siblings, Caroline and Philip, and they were born in 1972 and 1976. So Stephen was the oldest. And you can't really say that the family was close. It kind of seems like everyone kept to themselves, but I also wasn't there, so I don't really know, What we do know is that his parents had divorced when Stephen was 13, and the kids all went to live with their mother. Now, Moira, she got caught and arrested for fraud. She was playing the system a bit. She was lying to receive certain government benefits. So she got caught, she got arrested for this, and she ended up spending some time in prison. The family, they had their financial struggles, but Stephen's father, when they were separated, he had saved every penny, and he ended up sending Stephen to Queen Elizabeth Grammar School, which is a private boarding school in Wakefield. And this had me thinking, because they must have saw something in Stephen, he must have been really smart or something, because they wanted to send him to this private boarding school for Smarties. So maybe he showed just signs of being a smart guy. He's a smart guy. This private school, another serial killer had gone to Queen Elizabeth Grammar School. Just a funny coincidence, I guess. But it was this guy. He went by the acid bath murderer. I thought maybe I had done this story, but I haven't. It's this guy named John. He was a serial killer. Maybe I'll do a video on it if you want me to. But he went to that school as well. They didn't cross paths, but they both went there. Just a fun fact, I guess. I don't know. It was said that during his time at Queen Elizabeth's, that his pattern of strange behavior kind of started to show. He was a little different. There was this one guy, his name was Martin, and he was one of Stephen's classmates, but he would later say, in an interview, that Stephen would carry around a briefcase at school, and inside the briefcase, he always had a knife. I don't know, Martin would say that Stephen was fascinated by martial arts magazines and also weapons. And another classmate described Stephen as, quote, a bit of a nutter, going on to say that he liked skinning birds and doing things to animals. So to some people, Stephen stood out as a bit of an oddball, I guess you could say, right? In 1986, when Stephen was 17, he ends up leaving school and he goes back to live with his mom. The Daily Mail had reported that his mom was quite promiscuous and that she would have men over all of the time. And it was said that she would take them into the backyard in their garden area and have sexual relations with them in full view of the neighbors. What's that called? An exhibitionist? Maybe she was that. Either way, this seemed to really upset Stephen. Right? He was seeing men constantly coming and going. His mom seemed to be choosing men over the family. And it was said that he started to kind of resent his mom during this time. It was said throughout his upbringing, Stephen was treated by different psychiatrists at 3 different hospitals. Again, unsure what led to these visits. If
they saw something in him. What, I don't know, but what we do know is that psychiatrists, after giving him medication, they had made notes like in his file saying like, he is a dangerous man. And like that was about it. They just made that note in his file. It's like, okay, great. And then in June of 1987, when Stephen was 18, he was caught shoplifting at a local supermarket. And when he was confronted, he took out, his knife that he liked to carry around, and he slashed the manager's face. This led to his arrest, where he was sentenced to 3 years in youth custody. So while in custody, Stephen told probation officers and psychiatrists that he fantasized about being a serial killer. I know, he said this out loud. Most people keep it in their head, but he was like, yeah, this is my goals and dreams in life. Like, that would be great. So with these hopes and dreams, he was released from custody the following year. You'd think that they'd make a little note in his file saying like, he dreams of being a serial killer. Maybe let's keep an eye on this one. But they didn't. So once he was out, at this point, Stephen had completely cut contact with his family and was ready to just move on with his life. So he was able to get a flat in Manningham with different grants and government assistance programs. And while living there, he attended Bradford College, their psychology program, in 1988. So then in September of 1989, Stephen, he gets in trouble again. He was using, I guess, an illegal air pistol to shoot birds. He would go get them after he shot them and then dissect them. Well, he got caught for this, and then he ended up getting sentenced to 100 hours of community service. He would be sent to Rampton Hospital, where he was diagnosed with a personality disorder as well as sadistic and schizoid psychopathy. Nailed it. His psychiatric report described him as having a, quote, preoccupation with murder, particularly multiple murder. Like, okay, great. He sounds promising. The following year, Stephen is given a 2-year prison sentence after he got caught holding a knife to a girl's throat. And, I couldn't find any information about this. It was just this happened, and he ended up serving a sentence at Leeds prison. So feel like, all the red flags have been there for quite some time now, So he gets released from Leeds prison in 1993. And, he's still very fascinated with serial killers. And this leads him to just buying a bunch of books and wanting to learn more about different killers. So, he could study them more efficiently. He was, I guess, really into Jack the Ripper, the Moors murderers, the acid bath murderer, and one of his personal favorites was the Yorkshire Ripper. He really liked the Yorkshire Ripper because he killed a lot of women, and also he was local to the area that Stephen had lived in. So Stephen's yeah. That's him jacking it to these killers. Then in 1996, at the age of 27, Stephen had moved into a 1-bedroom flat in Holmfield Court. And this was a housing association complex. Now, his place was right on the edge of Bradford's red light district. And it was known for being a spot where sex workers would hang out and, walk along this area. It's Thornton Road, and they'd be there every day. When Stephen moves here, he's still in school, and he seems to be doing really well. He's really smart, this guy. He had really high grades. He was excelling, and I guess in the fall of 1997, Stephen begins pursuing a bachelor's degree in psychology at Leeds University. So while he's there, he meets a girl, and the two of them start dating. Her name is Zeta. It was said that he would usually go over to her place, 3 or 4 times a week, and that he would never invite her back to his place. Now, if you're dating someone and they don't invite you back to their place, usually it's oh, you must live with your parents or something, right? Well, it was more than that. But according to Zeta, Stephen would experience sexual difficulties, and she said that he was just straight up odd at times. He would get angry if she ever touched his hair, and that Stephen was so afraid that
insects or spiders would get into his ears at night, that he would like plug them with cotton wool before bed. But listen, like on TikTok, the algorithm, you know, I don't know, but it's been showing me videos lately of people like cleaning out their ears and like a big old spider comes out. So like I kind of get it. Because after seeing those TikToks, I was like, I should wear earplugs. I wanted to die. It was so gross. But Steven was like super paranoid about it. She was like, okay. So the two of them are dating for like 2 years and she still hasn't been over to his place. So it's like, okay, like when are you going to invite me over to your place? Like, do you even have a place? You live on the corner somewhere? Like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of weird, right? So he finally invites her over to his place. So she said that when she walked in, that her jaw just dropped because she said that his flat was horrific and very scary. She said that when he walked in, first of all, she would look to like her right or something, and there was a bookcase, and it was filled with different horror books on just different serial killers. And, you know, at the time, you got to think about this. This is like pre-internet and all that stuff. Like, it was a little weird. It was like, what is that? And then she also said that there was a ton of, quote, horrific video nasties. I know, I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it was, she didn't like it. So she sees all that and she's like, oh my God, okay. I thought you liked psychology or whatever. She also said that on every single surface in the flat, it was covered in plastic. Even the carpets, like everything was covered in plastic because Steven was apparently a bit of a neat freak. She's like, okay, this is so cool. Wow. So she said that when she got to his place, obviously, like she was feeling uneasy, she was feeling unsafe, and she kind of just had that like gut feeling of like, I need to get the F out of here. So she tells Steven, like, I don't feel well. Can you please take me home? And he does. She had to get out of there like ASAP. And then soon after this, she broke up with him. And good thing. So I guess after this, you know, Steven had like various different girlfriends and he was just not ideal. It was said that he was very controlling. He would like make the girlfriends cut out all of their friends and families. He would stalk them. He would harass them, beat them. And it was said like at times he would spike their drinks with different drugs and then, you know, would do whatever he wanted with them. So what I'm getting at is that he was just awful to these women. There was one girlfriend specifically that had broke up with him and he had stalked and harassed her like pretty badly. And she had even gone to the police, but like nothing came of it. Steven would like go to her place and spray paint bad words on her walls. He would leave these like super long, creepy voicemails. There was like one voicemail recording where he's like, I'm not going away. And then he laughs like a psycho.
I'm not going to go away, so I guess you'd better.
It's like a cartoon evil villain laugh. It's a performance. But he was awful. So he's doing this, and I think eventually he just realizes he's not really, I don't know, maybe he gets bored because eventually he starts leaving his exes alone. Maybe it was getting old and he was over it. But now he got into something new. He had a new hobby, and it was lizards and snakes. I know, very random. I was like, what? That was a sharp left. Lizards and snakes. He got into reptiles, and it was said that he would carry a few of them like in his backpack because it was a good way to talk to people. I could see that. Like if you pull out a snake or like a big lizard or something, people are going to be like, whoa, man, that's cool. Maybe. I don't know. I'd run, but that's just me. So this was his new hobby. Lizards. Snakes. His neighbors in the Bradford apartment building, they initially thought Steven was just like a little weird boy. You know, like nothing major. Like he's just a weirdo. They gave him the nickname Lizard Man. Oh yeah. Because they would watch him or see him outside taking his lizards on walks. Yes. He had the lizards on leashes and he would take them on walks. I was very interested in this. I was like, tell me more. Do they walk fast? Do they run? Like what? What kind of leash?
But he was doing this, and his neighbors were like, that guy's weird. During his walks, Stephen always had like his hair slicked back. He would have his sunglasses on, and he would wear like a long black coat, no matter what the weather. I guess Stephen at this point was like in his goth phase. All black. Sometimes if his hair wasn't slicked back, it would be spiked. He'd be wearing makeup, and it was different for the community that he lived in. And again, he was just seen as like a weird boy. So Stephen, I guess he never worked. He didn't have to. He was living on benefits and different grants, and then he was going to school. So if he wasn't doing that, going to school, or stalking his girlfriends, or walking his lizards, he was spending his free time on MySpace. On MySpace, he went by the name Ven Pariah, and many think he got the name Ven from the second half of his name, Steve Ven. You get it. And then pariah meaning like an outcast. If he wasn't on MySpace being weird, he was being weird by like downloading violent pornography for his own pleasure. Yes, he was a little weird boy, but he still managed to like graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Leeds University in 2003. And in 2009, Stephen was admitted to the University of Bradford to write a PhD in homicide studies. He was researching murders in Bradford in the 19th century for his thesis at the time of his crimes. And again, like, he was really smart. He was always at like the top of his class, and it's a damn shame. So then on June 22nd, 2009, 43-year-old Susan Rushworth disappeared. Susan had first married in her early 20s and had 2 kids. And it was said, like, by all accounts, she had a good life. And then after she and her first husband divorced, Susan would find a love again and would go on to, have another child. But I guess when this second relationship had ended, she, met a new guy, and this new guy had introduced her to heroin. Not great. Susan's mother grew like very concerned for her daughter, and she tried to help her go to rehab, which was successful for a few months. But then Susan found herself drawn back to the drug again, and, so began a cycle of addiction and trying to get clean. At one point, Susan became a sex worker to help, pay for her addiction. And the day of her disappearance, she was on her way to the pharmacy, and she was last seen in Manningham area, getting off the bus around 12 p.m. Now, when she had gone missing, police, it's not like they didn't do anything. They actually like interviewed potential witnesses. They had searched nearby woodlands. They drained a local lake, but there were no leads in the search for Susan. And it just went like nowhere. But then about 10 months after her disappearance, another woman would go missing in the area. Shelley Armitage was a bubbly girl who grew up attending Catholic school. There's photos from her family's like beach vacation that show her to be like a carefree soul. As a young child, Shelley wanted to be a model and travel the world. But sadly, she became addicted to heroin at just the age of 16. And, she would struggle on and off with her addiction. And by the age of 31, Shelley had disappeared. She was last seen on April 26, 2010. It was like around lunchtime on April 26, and she had bumped into her parents while they were out shopping. Little did they know, like, this would actually be the last time that they would see their daughter, see and talk to her, because they stopped and like talked. And then they went on their way, and like this would be the last time they saw her. At 7 p.m. that evening, Shelley had left her flat with a friend, and the two of them had dinner before walking toward Sunbridge Road and Rebecca Street to, quote, go on the beat, which I guess was slang for like, I'm going to go sex work and like get a client. She was last seen on CCTV footage at 10 p.m. that night, and like she just freaking vanished. So police had done a detailed search hoping to find something, but again, just nothing, no leads. So then some time goes by, and then another woman goes missing from this area. Suzanne Blaemeyers was born and brought up in Bradford. Suzanne was described as like feisty, spirited, and, a lovely woman. And she actually like began training as a nurse. But her life like began to unravel in her early 20s, where she started using heroin. And by 25, Suzanne had started to do sex work to pay for her addiction. Suzanne was last seen on May 21st, 2010, by her mother, who had dropped her off at her flat. So police would get one lead that would break this case wide open. So there was a man. He was just minding his own business, walking his dog in Shipley by the water. And he looks out in the water and he sees a rucksack floating. He's like, oh, weird, you know? So he decides to like pull it out, and it's heavy. It's filled with something. So he decides to look inside. So he opens it up, you know? He opens it up, and he said at first he thought it was a football. It's not funny. It's just like, you know, I had a trauma. He thought it was a football. But when he really looked at it, it was actually a head. It was a head. Could you imagine? No. So the head, badly dismembered. And because of this, it made it really hard to ID who the person was. Police, obviously, they come out and they investigate. It was said at this point, like, police knew that they had, like, a serial killer on their hands. You think? But yeah. Just 2 days before this happened, a caretaker who was managing the property where Stephen lived, this caretaker was looking through footage from the security cameras. It was said that, like, part of his job, he would do this every couple of days, you know, to see, like, if there was any shitheads, like, who had vandalized the place or was doing something shady, whatever. But while looking at the footage, he came across something very weird. He sees that at 2:30 a.m. on CCTV footage, that was a lot, it shows Stephen heading into his apartment with Suzanne Blameyers. And you see, like, the two of them outside. They seem friendly, like they know each other. And they're heading inside. They get into the elevator, and everything looked fine at first. But 3 minutes later, Suzanne is seen running out of, like, Stephen's apartment. And she has this look of fear on her face. She looks panicked. Then you see Stephen coming out of his apartment, coming after her, and he's holding a crossbow and trying to shoot Suzanne. So I guess he shoots it. It's off camera, so we don't know if he hits her or not, but whatever. He runs after her, and again, all off camera, and I guess he tackles her to the ground. But then you see Stephen come back to the cameras, and he's looking directly at the camera, and he flips it off. He shows his crossbow, and he's like he's fully aware that the camera's there and it's recording, and he's kind of like just, I don't know, mocking it, I guess. Then you see him dragging Suzanne's body back into his apartment with an arrow in her head. So maybe he did hit her. Whatever, but you see that. He drags her back into the apartment, and then a few minutes later, you see Stephen leave his apartment again. It seems like he's heading to the red light district in hopes to, like, lure another victim. Then at 3:35 a.m., Stephen is seen on CCTV footage outside his place with another woman. Now, the two of them are outside, and they seem to be chatting, and everything's fine. She must have felt that something was off. Maybe he was weird. We don't know. But she decides to not go inside with Stephen, and instead she, like, takes off for the night. So after this, you see Stephen on CCTV, like, leaving his place again with the goal, again, of, like, trying to find another victim. He's then caught on CCTV footage coming home around 4:28 a.m., and it seems like he had no luck of finding his next victim. When police got the CCTV footage, they arrested him, like, shortly after, with 22 police officers, like, storming into his place on May 24th, 2010. So after Stephen's arrest, he was questioned, and he was pretty open about it. Like, he told police everything. He explained that after killing the women, he ate parts of them. I don't know what's wrong with people. I don't know. I mean, like, he's kind of been telling everyone that he was going to do this for a very long time. You know, like, he told people he wanted to be a serial killer. I just feel like, you know, I don't know. Maybe it could have been prevented. I don't know. Police, they could confirm this because, like, on Stephen's stove, they found DNA that belonged to both Shelley and also Susan.
Stephen went into great detail about like what he did. He said afterwards he would place the parts into different like duffel bags and plastic bags, and then he would take them to the nearby lake to dump them. Now, police were able to get a very detailed picture of what happened to Shelley, partly because Stephen actually recorded some of the killing on his freaking phone. Oh my God, I know. Now, this is like a little side note, but at some point, someone found a phone on the train. And this person, they went like looking through the phone. You know, they came across a footage of what seemed to be a murder. So they turned it into the police. Some people believe that like Stephen might have left the phone on the train on purpose because like he wanted the attention, something like that. Others say it was like a dumb accident, but either way, awful. So police get this footage, it's linked to him, whatever. But on the video, it showed that after dragging Shelley back into his flat, he tied her up in the bath. So he gets her in the tub, and then I guess he spray paints on her back, "My sex slave." Okay. And while he's filming, he gives like a little voiceover moment. So you hear him say, "I am then pariah. I am the bloodbath artist." Yeah. "Here's a model who is assisting me." He then, again, all this is on he's filming all this. He then dismembers her in his bathtub using knives and power tools. Yeah, not great. Once he's done dismembering her, he takes parts of her body, puts it in a rucksack, and then is caught like leaving the flat with it. Okay, so then he caught a train and was captured on CCTV at one of the stations with the rucksack. He then gets off the train, whatever. He seems to dump the bag, and then he's seen on CCTV going home. I guess when he was home, he tried to disinfect all the surfaces and get rid of any evidence. And then after killing his final victim, Suzanne, Stephen, again going by Ven Pariah, posted the following on MySpace. He said, "Ven Pariah has finally emerged into the world. What will this pseudo-human do, one wonders. Poor Stephen, pretended to be me, but he was only the wrapping. He knew towards the end that I supplied the inner core of iron, hatred bound tightly in flesh. At very long last, the time has come to act out." I guess these words echoed author Thomas Harris's Psychopath in the novel Red Dragon. It's the book that introduces the infamous Hannibal Lecter. Stephen told police that he would approach these women and tell them that he was a photographer and that he wanted to take photos of them back at his place. And he said that a lot of the times he would offer them either drugs or money in exchange, for the photographs. So if the ladies accepted, they'd go back to his place, and he would often tell them to lie on the bed and have their backsides in the air for portraits that would go in his new art gallery exhibit. Stephen did in fact photograph the women, but sadly the photos weren't taken until they were dead, and the photos became part of his personal trophy collection. So during questioning, he bragged to the officers that he had actually killed many, many more women than this. But he never gave details as to how many, when, where, how. So police, they went out to Stephen's, and searched his flat. And while they're there, they found, 2 crossbows and bolts, along with 30 knives and bookshelves filled with stories and magazines on different serial killers. They also found DNA evidence of victims on his walls, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, just all over the place. He did not do a good job of trying to hide any evidence. So to the police, it seemed that Stephen had tried to recently get rid of the evidence because his carpets, they were all ripped up, and some of the tiles inside of his place, they were removed, but wasn't successful. While Stephen was in custody, a person out by the banks of River Air, which was like 5 miles north of Stephen's flat, they had discovered a woman's head and other body parts as well. There was the crossbow bolt, and again, there was like a knife still stuck in the head. The head had been skinned, and nearby was what seemed to be like a killer's kit bag, which had hacksaws, knives inside, and it was assumed that this was used for dismemberment, you know? A few days later, police confirmed that the body parts belonged to Suzanne and also Shelley. So Stephen was charged with their murders as well as with Susan Rushworth's. Stephen confessed to killing Susan, Shelley, and Suzanne during interrogation. So when police asked him, hey, why did you do it? He said, sometimes you kill someone to kill yourself or kill part of yourself. I don't know. It's like deep issues inside of me. Okay. At least he's self-aware, I guess. I don't know. Stephen had told police that he killed in total 6 women, but he wouldn't say who the others were. He also wouldn't tell them like where they are, when, where, how, where, why, nothing. He also wouldn't tell investigators where Susan Rushworth's body was located, and to this day, he still hasn't said where. She hasn't been found. So Stephen made his first appearance at Crown Court on May 28th, 2010. Now, this was just like one day after the tabloids had referred to him as the crossbow cannibal, and he seemed to really like this. He was like, that's fun. Because when the magistrate asked for his name, Stephen had responded back saying, the crossbow cannibal. I mean, again, since a young age, he said he wanted to be a serial killer, so I'm sure this title made him happy. Well, did it? I don't know. Gave him something. So after this, his trial date was set for later that year. Oh, I'm a little snow bunny. That's how I feel. So, December 21st, 2010. Stephen, dressed in a gray tracksuit. He was surrounded by 5 security guards. He enters the Leeds Crown Court. So during proceedings, the court showed the CCTV footage and presented the DNA evidence as well as a confession. And there is no denying that he did this. Stephen's defense argued that the quote-unquote system is the one who's at fault because Stephen had been diagnosed as psychopathic nearly 20 years earlier. And maybe they should have done something about it. It wasn't his fault. The judge convicted Stephen Griffiths of all 3 murders and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So England's then Prime Minister, his name is David Cameron, he said that the murders were a terrible shock and that the government should once again look at decriminalizing offenses related to sex work. So they have protection. But that in itself sent people into a frenzy. Oh God. As for Stephen Griffiths, he's still in prison. And throughout the years, I guess he's attempted to off himself numerous times. After his 6th failed attempt, he decided to go on a 120-day hunger strike. And the prison staff said that they knew that this was Stephen's attention-seeking behavior and that he was essentially being a drama queen. They're like, go ahead, starve yourself. Eye roll. In 2019, Stephen was attacked by another prisoner with a sharpened piece of wood, and he was rushed to the hospital, but he would survive the attack. And yeah, that is where he is at even now, sitting in prison. And that is the case of Stephen Griffiths. I will agree with his defense that the system as a whole definitely failed on this one, throughout the years. You saw, or you listened, that they had been saying hey, red flag, this guy's a little concerning. He openly is saying he wants to be a serial killer. I don't know. Maybe he might be. It's really frustrating when you hear cases like this because it's all the signs were there. Come on. But then again, I was thinking if all the signs are there, you can't just arrest someone because all the signs are there. You need evidence, right? So it's okay, all the signs are there, but you can't just arrest someone because they're
They're weird. You would think if local women were going missing who also do sex work, you'd maybe go to, like, as police, you would go to your files and like have a flag on certain accounts, like Steven's account, like, hey, this guy has been kind of weird throughout his life, like maybe we should pay him a visit. I mean, I don't know how police like work, so I'm just a girl on the internet, but you would think, right? I don't know. I'm sure we can all agree that maybe this could have been prevented. And sadly, like, 3 lives were lost. He claims more, but I kind of think, a lot of people think too, that he's just saying that because he wants to be up there with that acid bath killer guy. No, the Yorkshire killer guy. He wants to be like up there with him. But whatever. I mean, get better goals. Get better goals. He could have like done something great. He was going really smart in school. It's a shame. It's a shame he's an idiot. All right. Well, let me know your thoughts down below if you have any. And let me know who you would like me to talk about next time. But other than that, thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. You make good choices. Do you like this look? I think I like it. It's cute. Oh my god, I'm a little snow bunny. It's just so cold and I'm like dewy and glowy. It's so crazy. Oh my god. All right, I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye.
Okay, so Armin, he was born on December 1st, 1961. Armin's father, he was a police officer, so he had a good job. He saved up enough money to buy his family a 36-room, 16,000 square foot mansion in Germany. So Armin's parents, they married when the mom was 40 years old and dad was 21 years old. So there was a big age difference. Armin would say that like his mom was extremely controlling. She was manipulative. Jesus Christ. She was manipulative. She was jealous. She was always accusing her husband of cheating, and that she got pregnant with Armin pretty much as a way to keep her husband. Not because she wanted a baby, but because she just wanted to pretty much keep her husband so he wouldn't leave. His mom was extremely just possessive of him. I guess his mom and dad would always fight, and then she would threaten to kill him all the time. Like this was just a normal thing that would happen in the household, and it was just a very toxic relationship. So there were a total of 3 kids. So Armin was the youngest, and then he had 2 older siblings. But when he was young, like 5 or 6 years old, his older siblings actually left the house. They just were tired of it. Since they were older, they were like older teenagers. They just decided, peace out, we're gone. So they left, which just left Armin at home with his mom and dad by himself. Armin would say that his mom would just not show any affection. She wasn't loving. She didn't show any type of love. There was no relationship really at all between them. If anything, she would just yell at him. She was always asking him to do all of the household chores. Like she wouldn't really do anything. It was always up to him. And he's like 6 or 7 years old. And then eventually Armin's father just picked up and left. And Armin was 7 years old. So when he was pretty young, his dad just stormed out of the house, got into the car, and drove off. No explanation, nothing. And he never saw him again. So not only did his older siblings leave, so did his father. So I can't imagine what that's going to do to a child. But life goes on. And to keep himself busy, like to pass the time, he would read. So he started reading Robinson Crusoe. I guess just to keep it simple, the story in it, there is a part about cannibalism. He found himself just being fixated on eating another person and would kind of obsess over it. He was 10 years old at the time. Yeah, that's where it started for him, the introduction. So time goes on, and then at 19 years old, Armin left home and he joined the West German army. He wanted to be a professional soldier and spent 12 years in the armed forces. He felt comfortable and normality that stopped him from pursuing his fantasies. During this period when he was in the army, he developed friendships with women, but it never went anywhere. He started to question his sexuality and would ask his friend, like, do you think I'm gay? And his friend would say, that's something that you need to know. I can't tell you that. His friend, because there's an interview with his friend, he would say that, like, everyone kind of knew he was gay, but it was kind of like Armin was the last to know. Or maybe he just didn't know what it was. And then he started drinking. He started drinking pretty heavily. He ended up getting in 2 car accidents, and both of them were because he was driving intoxicated. And then he ended up getting kicked out from the army. So then he moves back home with his mom. And at this point, he's now 32. So he was in the army for a while. So Armin moves back home with his mom. At this point, she's older now. She's ill. She really can't do much for herself any longer. Not that it's from the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like she really did anything on her own anyways. But he went there to take care of her. Plus, there was plenty of room because she lived in this humongo mansion. He decided to go in a different career path, though, and he ended up becoming a computer engineer, and he succeeded in his job doing that. He worked for, I believe, a bank. So then the 90s come around, and Armin got introduced, or the whole world got introduced to the World Wide Web, the good old days. Now, back in, like, when the internet first started, first of all, websites were super janky, but also the internet really wasn't that monitored as well. So like there wasn't anyone policing things that could be illegal. You see what I'm saying? Armin started to poke around on the internet, kind of like typing in whatever, and he came across a community of cannibals. It was like a website that was for cannibals, and they would all discuss. It was pretty much like a forum where everyone would come together, not everyone, the cannibals would come together and talk about how they pretty much wanted to eat each other and their fantasies of eating people. So when Armin saw this, he was like, hell yeah, there's other people out there like me. So I'm not alone in feeling like this. Like there's other people out there feeling like this. And the internet really, it bridged a gap between fantasy and reality. He ended up building his own website where he can openly talk about cannibalism, and he would also create fake images. There was this website that he would visit. It was called Cannibal Cafe. And naturally, when I read that, I was like, Cannibal Cafe. And I tried to like go to the website or whatever. I was just curious to know if it was still up. It's not up anymore. But if you use Wayback Machine, it lets you browse past internet stuff that you really can't find nowadays. And you can find it through there. You can't find Armin's posts from back then. A lot of them got removed once shit went down. But it's such an interesting website. It's creepy. And it's pretty much just a cheap looking, well, yeah, because the internet back then was so basic. So it's like a forum, and people would just post about like their fantasies. I want to eat your flesh. And just, well, I can't wait to murder this girl and eat her. Yeah, a lot of that. So Armin, being the little crafty little bitch that he is, he would go down to like a butcher shop. He would buy some meat. He would take this meat and like shape it and sculpt it and to make it look like they were body parts. He would take photos of it, and then he would post it on these websites that he was visiting and make it look like he really did kill somebody, and like brag about how he killed somebody and cooked them and ate them and stuff. So people have been lying on the internet since day one. So just FYI, he made it look like it was real dead bodies, and he was sharing these images on the cannibal websites, and people were believing it and like idolizing him because he was actually doing it. Like all these people on there were talk, and he was actually doing it. So he kind of became a little internet famous. Then the 2nd of September 1999 rolls around. Armin comes home from work, so he's still working his computer engineering job. He comes home from work, he goes up to his mom's bedroom, and he finds his mom dead in bed. Now most of us would be really sad, but Armin was like, fuck yeah, she dead. Finally, he was excited because he was free. He was finally free from his mom's control, from her abuse, and he felt like he could finally deep dive into his fantasy of eating people because his mom wasn't there any longer to judge him. His mom didn't know like what he was doing, but with her not there, he decided, I'm going to turn one of the bedrooms into like my dungeon or my cannibal room, and that's where I'm gonna like take photos, all that good stuff. He was just relieved because now he could live his life in his own rules. He felt a sense of freedom. He now has the house to himself, and his dominating mother was out of the picture. He then took his fantasy to the next level. 2 months after his mom was gone, he started advertising on these cannibal websites. So Armin decided to post on the Cannibal Cafe website asking for a volunteer. He was asking for anyone willing to be eaten. So a lot of the people on this website would post like role play. They would say role play when they wanted someone to just kind of play along with the idea of being eaten. But Armin was actually looking for a volunteer, someone who wanted to die, and if he could do it. At least he asked before he did it. You know, that was nice, I guess. So he kind of hit a couple of websites because there were multiple cannibal websites, and he would post in German and in English. One of them said, I'm in search for a young boy between 18 and 30 years old. If you have a normal build body and you are willing to die, then come to me. I'm butchering you and eat your horny flesh. Hot. I'm not sure what horny flesh is, but okay. So Armin made his way around these websites, and he was looking for somebody who was willing to die. Something that Armin stood by was that he didn't want somebody who was not willing to die. He wanted this person to willingly participate, and he made that very clear. I love that I'm trying to do winged liner while talking, like this isn't working. Hold please. Anyways, so Armin wants horny flesh. Surprisingly, he gets a lot of responses. A lot of people are writing him back, but then last minute they would back out. But Armin had one guy come forward and say like, yeah, I'll do it. So this man, I didn't get his name, but this man comes forward. They start emailing back and forth, and this man seems really interested. He's like, it's my fantasy to be eaten. So Armin writes back, cool. I'm sure he doesn't say cool, but he says, all right, let's meet here at my house. We'll go through with it. So this man comes over to Armin's mansion. He's in this huge ass creepy mansion by himself. The man comes over and he lays out on the table, and Armin is telling him play by play what's going to happen. And then the man tells Armin that he's not feeling well, that he didn't really want to do this. He didn't want to go through with this. And Armin, he says, okay, let's not do this then. And he lets the man get up and walk out and go home. Again, Armin wanted somebody who was willing to be eaten. He didn't want to murder somebody. Like, that wasn't his fantasy. Which, side note, that guy is lucky that Armin wasn't fully crazy, because he could have easily just died that night. But he didn't. Armin didn't want to be a murderer. So Armin was a little bummed that it didn't work out, but little DIY Armin over here. He ended up paper macheing a body. He painted it and made it look like it was a person, and he took photos of it. He also got a mannequin from a store, one that was being thrown out. He got this mannequin, painted it, again, making it look like a dead body. He would take pictures of it and post it on the Cannibal website, making it look like he did kill somebody and ate them. I mean, the internet was just going crazy over him. They're like, wow, you're our hero. They were just really idolizing Armin and the fact that he was killing and eating people. So Armin was, internet king on this cannibal website, and was determined to find somebody who was willing to die, right? And he prepared one of the extra rooms in the house to be the slaughter room, and the slaughter room had no windows in there. He had a cage to hold his victims or whatever, and he also had meat hooks hanging from the ceiling, kind of like Catherine. So finally, he gets a response. Okay, someone who is willing to be eaten. The final person to respond to Armin's post, his name was Brandes. Brandes was an engineer. He was 34 years old. He was actually married, but he came out to his wife as being curious. He wanted to experiment with men. I think he knew he was gay, but maybe he was just too afraid to actually say it because he was married. So they ended up separating because it caused a lot of tension in the relationship. So Brandes was on the cannibal websites as well. He's interested in this. He writes Armin and he's like, he volunteers himself to be eaten. They email each other back and forth, and Armin discusses with Brandes the best way to be consumed and what he plans on doing with his body. Brandes actually throws out a lot of ideas as well, like, I want my skull to be used as an ashtray. That was his request. Brandes also expressed to Armin that he wanted his penis to be cut off and for both of them to eat it. He wanted to share the eatation of the penis. Brandes said that this was a big fantasy of his, to chop off his wiener. Dream big, they say. Dream big. I forgot to say, if you hear humming, I'm sorry, I had to turn on my fan. It gets so hot in this room with my lights that I was melting, and it's got me nervous about what's to come with summertime approaching. So if you hear humming, I'm sorry, but a bitch is hot. Anyways, so Brandes was telling Armin his fantasies. And Armin, as crazy as this sounds, in interviews, he said that he didn't want to be disrespectful and not do anything that wasn't of the volunteers' wishes. So if a volunteer wanted to be eaten a certain way, he would make sure and do that for the volunteer because he didn't want to disrespect at all. So Brandes is telling Armin, I want my dick to be eaten. So March 9th, 2001, Brandes, who has been communicating with Armin for a while now, they set a date, they set a plan, March 9th, come out here, Armin's place, and we will feast, we will eat. So once Brandes gets there, they have sexual relations, right? Armin gives Brandes a bunch of sleeping pills, and he gives him some Vicks, and he gives him some alcohol. And the reason he does this is because he doesn't want Brandes to be in any pain, and he thinks that this will help with the pain. Now, Brandes takes the sleeping pills and the alcohol and everything willingly, like he's not sneaking it into his drink or his food or anything like that. Armin tells Brandes that this is going to help with the pain. This will help so you don't really feel anything. Armin tells Brandes ahead of time that he's going to film the process so he can watch it over and over and over again and get that sick thrill that he's looking to get and like probably take his pants off to it or something. So Armin sets up the video camera. Brandes, he lays down on the table. Armin then decides we're going to start with the penis first. We're going to chop off your penis, and then we're both going to eat it together. Armin has the video recorder going, starts to cut off the penis. In an interview, Armin says Brandes screamed horribly, but it was short, maybe 20 to 30 seconds, and that blood was squirting from the open wound similar to a fountain. These are his words, but they got the penis off. So Armin decides to then cook the penis because, you know, like that was the wish. He goes over into the kitchen, goes to the stovetop thing. He puts a little bit of garlic, some salt, some pepper, chop up the wiener, puts it in there, some oil, flipping it. Oh, I kind of hate this liner. It's burning my eyes. So after cooking the wiener, he serves it to Brandes and himself on a nice plate, feeds it to him. Armin says that the penis tastes disgusting. It was super chewy and it just wasn't edible, and he was pretty bummed. He said it was really disappointing, but it just was not edible. Brandes is bleeding a lot, creating a mess. Armin decides to put Brandes into the bathtub. That way he could like run the water and it wouldn't be so messy because he's bleeding. He's just gonna let him bleed out essentially, and he sits in the bathtub and he just waits it out. Every 15 minutes Armin would go and like check on him in the bathtub. He said that, you know, it was a really slow process. Like he thought he was gonna die a lot faster, but he was just dying at a slow pace. So he busted out his Star Trek book. I'm not lying, this is what he said in the interview. His Star Trek book. You know, kill the time, read this book, and wait it out until Brandes died. He wasn't dying fast enough. So about after like 3 hours, Armin just goes in there. He says, sorry, I'm just gonna slit your throat because you're taking too long to die. Gives Brandes a kiss, and then he slits his throat. You know, there's just a lot going on in this story to the point where like, it's really hard to believe. Okay, once Brandes has died, that's when Armin now gets to work. He takes his body out of the tub and he chops Brandes into pieces. He puts part of him in the freezer and then he buries the skull in the garden. In an interview, Armin says that he decorated the table with nice candles. I took out my best dinner service and I fried a piece of rump steak, a piece from his back, made what I call princess potatoes and sprouts. After I prepared my meal, I ate it. These are his quotes. He then goes on to say, the first bite was of course very strange. It was a feeling I can't really describe. I'd spent over 40 years longing for it, dreaming about it. And now I was getting the feeling that I was actually achieving this perfect interconnection through his flesh. The flesh tastes like pork, but stronger. He then stored a lot of the pieces of the body like in little Ziploc bags. He put them in his freezer. He hid them underneath a bunch of pizza boxes. And he would spend the next 6 to 8 months eating parts of the body. He would add it as pizza topping. He would eat some for breakfast. He was just using this as his food supply. I don't know what to say to that. I really don't know. So I forgot to say, Armin took video footage of this whole process, right? But then he also took photos of the process as well. Armin then went on to his cannibal websites again, and he uploaded these photos of Brandes onto the website and like his body. And of course, once again, like this website goes crazy for him. They're like, oh my God, you're the best. And they're really idolizing him. I mean, Armin never acknowledges this, but I personally believe, which means nothing, but that he probably was getting some kind of high from this. Like, what comes from a family who really didn't even acknowledge him to now like being recognized for something, and that probably really made him feel good. Late November, early December, that's when Armin decides to go back onto his cannibal websites and advertise again because he wants a new volunteer. His supply is running low. He's been eating all of this meat for the last couple of months, and he needs a new fix. He needs some new fresh meat. He posts on a couple of different cannibal websites. Again, on this site, there was this Austrian student who saw Armin's posts and saw the pictures of the bodies and stuff, and then saw that Armin was looking for a new victim. So he actually tipped off police, letting them know, hey, I think this guy actually killed somebody. And on the morning of December 10th, 2002, police made a visit to the mansion that Armin lived in. Now police, they go into Armin's house and they start snooping around looking for any type of evidence, and they weren't coming across anything, which is odd because he had a slaughter room, but maybe they just didn't make it upstairs yet. We don't know. But they get to the refrigerator and they look in the freezer, and underneath pizza boxes they find 50 pounds of meat. And Armin tells the police that it's wild pig meat, but then another police officer looks closer and they notice there's skin on it still, and so they take the meat out, and upon further inspection they notice that it's human meat. So when the police ask him, is this like human meat? Armin says yes, and he admits to what he had done, and he tells them about the photos and the VHS showing what he had done. And Armin actually never once denies what he did. The only time he did deny something was when the police showed up. He didn't confess that it was human meat in the freezer. He said it was wild pig. But other than that, he was very honest, told them exactly what happened, showed them where the tapes were at, gave him his computer, everything. Police arrest him, naturally, as they should. On January 30th, 2004, Armin was convicted of manslaughter, and he was only sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. Look, real talk, that made a lot of people upset. Okay. So this case picked up a huge amount of media coverage, and people were outraged. But Armin's defense, and I think it's actually pretty damn strong, was that Brandes was willing. He volunteered. All of the email correspondence that investigators have found, he actually drove out to Armin's house, is like more proof. It also proved problematic for German lawyers who discovered that cannibalism is in fact legal in Germany. So instead they charged Armin with murder for the purposes of sexual pleasure and with disturbing the peace of the dead. They ended up showing the court 19 minutes of the video that Armin took, which I'm sure probably ruined a lot of people's lives because I couldn't imagine what they saw on that tape. Their argument was that he should have been convicted of murder and not manslaughter, and also that he should be given a life sentence, not 8 years. So in the retrial, they fought that Brandes was not in the right mind to be able to give consent. And then finally, May 10th, 2006, Armin was convicted of murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Afterwards, Armin he's in prison now. He's still in prison. He actually became a vegetarian. So he doesn't eat meat anymore. And he has done interviews, which you can find easily on YouTube, and I can link some down below. And in these interviews, he's very calm, very well spoken. He would not even... Hell, there's one thing I've learned about doing these murder mystery things is that nobody ever looks like a killer, but they're probably a killer. So he looks normal as hell, but he's a fucking killer. And yeah, he seems good, I guess. I don't know. He says what he did was wrong, and he acknowledges that. So yeah, I mean, this is Germany too. Like, I have no idea how their legal system works. I don't even know how our legal system works, for Christ's sakes. Don't know what the hell's going on over there in Germany. So that's the story about Armin Mavis. Let me know what you think of this story down below. I would ask the question, do you think he deserved life in prison? But I have a feeling everybody's going to say yes. A piece of advice would be anyone who looks really normal to you, they could potentially be a murderer. So don't be judgmental. I hope you guys have a really good day today. You make good choices. Let me know what story you want me to talk about next week. Let me know your thoughts. But other than that, I hope you have a very good day today. You make good choices. Be safe out there. I'll be seeing you guys later. Bye.
Cannibal! So today's story is about a cannibal. I thought it was kind of fitting with Thanksgiving coming up. Yeah, right? Makes sense. It made sense in my mind. Today's story I definitely haven't done before. I always see comments in the comment section, as they are, asking like, didn't you already do this story? Why are you doing this story again? Why are you doing it again, Bailey? No, I've never done a story twice. It's just, I can't help it. A lot of these stories kind of sound the same. So this story kind of sounds like one I've done before, but it's not. I'm just letting you know. Thank you. I'm not doing two stories twice. So today our story is about a guy named Karl Denke. Now he was born in like 1870 in Silesia, which is now considered southern Poland. Now this story itself has been requested for quite some time because you guys just love a cannibal story. You nasties. But just a disclaimer, there wasn't like too much information available because this story is so old and also a language barrier. So it's just, I'm working with what I got here, okay? Cool. Cannibals. Let's discuss, shall we? Let's discuss. So Karl was born in 1870. He was like the son of a farmer in a pretty wealthy farming community. Things were okay in the late 1870s, apparently. People were hanging in there, doing good work, making things work. There really just isn't much to say about his life growing up, but I'm guessing it wasn't all rainbows and lollipops because, first of all, we're here. Second of all, Karl apparently ran away from home at the age of 12. Couldn't find why, when, what'd he do? Where'd he go? But that's what happened. So fast forward to when Karl's 25 years old and his father dies. And again, his father or his family, Karl's family was like doing pretty well, so they're wealthy. So when he dies, he ends up leaving Karl, his son, some of the money, some of the family wealth, and then he ends up leaving his wealthy farm to Karl's older brother. I guess this was kind of upsetting to Karl, but I mean, he got some money. That's cool. You got money. But he wanted the farm. So with the money that he inherited from his father, he bought a different and smaller farm close by. So after taking care of the land and getting it to be in like a really good spot, he turns it around and he sells this smaller farm to make some kind of profit, which he does. Honestly, this Karl guy's kind of smart because he turns that around, sells it. Then he used that money to buy a 2-story house, okay, way nicer. He's like, I don't need a farm, I got a house. So he's living in this little town. I think it's called Zibitsi. I apologize for offending all of you for saying that incorrectly if I did. So it was here in this small town that Karl settled down. He got his house, he's got his shop, and this is the place he would call home. Karl kind of brought a little bit of the farm into this town, and he was establishing a business that sold all kinds of pork. Yeah, lots of pork-related products. One of his most popular selling products was his pickled pork. And he also sold leather goods. So you could get some pickled pork and then also pick up a belt. That's a good deal, I'm gonna get some pickled pork, I'm gonna get a belt. Now, Karl made quite the name for himself in town because he was like really good at doing pork stuff. He was porking away, and he did it so well that he expanded his sales and sold products in nearby towns. And like, again, pork was his thing. He was expanding the business. He was traveling to different towns selling his meat. I mean, this dude was really like making a name for himself. Good for him. He was hustling hard. So besides Carl being like a little entrepreneur, he also was really well known in town as just being like an all-around great guy. Yeah, he's just like, everyone's like, oh, Carl? Yeah, I know him. He's great. Love him. Carl would be kind of like considered a pillar in the community. Now, Carl, he didn't have a wife. He didn't have kids. He had a house though, right? But he was considered a very good, very moral, upstanding, kind citizen. In fact, he even had a nickname in town. Yeah, his nickname was Vata Denke, which means Papa. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was like, I guess, like the father figure in town, and a lot of people considered him a dad. They loved him. Carl over here was also a very religious man. He remained an active member at his local evangelical church, and he was there every Sunday, never missed a day. Plus, on top of that, he also played organ, which honestly, I love the organ. I kind of wish I played it, but it's so creepy. Like, it's fitting is what I'm getting at. He was also the designated cross bearer for all processions and funerals, plural. Cool. Way to go, Carl. Woo! Great. To everybody in the community, it just seems like Carl is building a real priest-like, dedicated bachelor reputation, and no one thought he was weird at all. Back then, if you looked at someone funny, you were considered weird, a witch, whatever. So they loved this guy, and no one thought he was weird. They loved him. He was the town's pork guy. On top of all this, Carl also loved to give back. He always offered travelers, like if new people came into town, he would offer them a place to stay, give them food, somewhere to sleep, and kind of act like his home was a boarding house. So everyone in town knew, like, hey, if you're ever struggling, if you're out of work, if you're maybe running away from something shady, Papa Denke had your back, like he's the guy you would go to. He would feed you, house you, offer you work if you needed cash. Like this guy was Jesus, it seemed, like it just seemed like he was just a saint. No red flags. I don't like these stories because it's like, what are you supposed to look out for? Let me paint a picture for you, like where we are in history. I guess World War I was happening or just had happened, and it was like a really, really dark and difficult time for Germany and the regions that were like lumped together around them. So the Weimar Republic was formed in 1918, directly after Germany lost the war to the Allies. Now, the scene was not good. There was mass starvation, hyperinflation, political unrest, and there was a ton of internal conflict. To sum it up, this period of time was so turbulent for the region that Hitler, who would be considered an insane person in all respects, really didn't take that long to seize power and do some horrible things afterwards, right? This is the political, social, economic scene where people like Papa Denke were considered basically angels. So with so many people suffering and so many people literally starving to death in what was basically a brand new country, him offering free room and board as well as a job opportunity every now and then was an incredibly sweet deal. Even when the economic instability came to Carl's front door and cost him the house he was living in, he continued to help transients by letting them stay in the ground floor apartment of the building that he was renting. And again, everyone's like, well, that Carl sure is a great guy. He makes great burgers, So that's our Carl. He's a beloved neighbor, salesman, organ-playing churchman who would give the shirt off his back to anyone in need. So imagine the surprise, and honestly, the straight-up disbelief you would feel when a rando from out of town accuses Carl, Saint Carl, of assaulting him. How could he? Liar. On December 24th, 1924. Yes, on Christmas Eve. Is this powder green? Okay. Well, a neighbor heard screaming coming from Carl's apartment. Oh, yeah. So the neighbor, his name is Gabriel, he's hearing the screaming, and he's like, oh, my God, like, I gotta go help whoever is. So he goes over there, And he's like, what's going on? What's going on? And he sees someone that he doesn't know, a stranger. His name's Vince. And this guy is like out in the hallway. He's bleeding from his head. Now, this gash in this guy's head, it wasn't like just a small cut to the forehead, my friends. Oh, nay. No. It was a giant gash in this man's head. He had been struck by a hatchet or an axe or something of that nature. There was a splitting situation happening on his head. I wouldn't know what I would do. I'd be like, stay there. I'm gonna go get help or something. But before the victim passed out because of his, massive head wound, he looks at Gabriel in the eyes and is like, the man who did this to me, his name was Carl Danke. And then he fainted. I'm hoping this powder doesn't turn me green. So police show up and this man was immediately taken to the police station. Yeah, they took him to the police station first and they're like, hey, we're going to get you a doctor. And it was like, okay, but why didn't they just take him to the doctor first? I mean, his head is split open, but then again, who am I? Shut up, Bailey. You weren't there. It was different times. This man's taken to the police station. They get him a doctor. And they're like, hey, can you give us a statement? Like, who did this to you? What happened to you? Can you talk to us? Again, this man was like, it was this man named Carl Danke was the one who hit him in the head with an axe. Oh, yeah. Hit him in the head with an axe. It was said that when the neighbor found Gabriel, and he said it was Carl who hit him in the head, the neighbor, his first reaction was to gasp quite loudly, it was said. And he's like, oh, Danke is a gentleman. The neighbor was absolutely floored, offended, did not believe him. So police take down his statement, and once he leaves, they're kind of like, yeah, we don't believe him. Instead, they labeled this man, the victim, as a drunk. He's a drunk. He's being sloppy. He must be confused. There's no way that Carl would do anything of this nature. And they just didn't take it seriously. Today might be a bad makeup day. I'm not sure yet. Oh, dear God. Oops. Mayday. So police figure that they should bring in Carl. They should bring him in for questioning, just so they can, get to the whole bottom of the story, set everything straight. So they do that. They bring in Carl. So Carl comes in, and he actually kind of surprises police officers because he's like, yeah, I did it. I'm responsible for that guy's head wound. And they're like, well, why'd you do it? Why would you do that? And Carl told police officers that he hit him with the axe because he was acting in self-defense. He said that this man was trying to, or at least attempted to, assault and rob him. So the axe was like the closest thing that Carl had. So he grabs it because we all got an axe on hand. So you grab that axe, he just, and attacked him. Self-defense, makes sense. Closet axe, we all got one. So police are like, all right, that sounds like it fair. Sounds like that could be correct. So police are like, well, we're going to have you, Carl, stay here overnight, spend the night here. You'll have your own cell, and we're just going to try and figure everything out, set everything straight, and then you should be free to go in the morning. So Carl's like, all right, fine, whatever. So they put Carl into a cell, and they leave him there until they could figure out, get things worked out, get things sorted out. You understand. Let me blend this before it dries and I regret everything. Now, accounts kind of vary depending on the source at this point. But while police were starting to investigate, at 11:30 p.m. that same evening, Carl committed suicide by hanging himself. Now, talk about a guilty man right there. Carl hung himself just a few hours after bringing him in. He did not wait that long. Nay. Now, I don't know what you think of that, but to me, that means guilty as hell. Whatever it is that he did something. Once police got word that Carl had killed himself, police headed over to Carl's house, and they went there to search for evidence or just for any type of information. Because if he just did that, if he killed himself, they're like, he probably had something going on that he wanted to hide. It's still Christmas Eve, 1924. Police go into Carl's home for evidence related to this crime. Remember, the guy getting his head split open. That's what they're here for. And they first noticed a very strong smell. They're like, it smells like vinegar. But they really didn't think much of it, given to the fact that Carl, he sold pickled pork as his income. So vinegar is just part of the game. So they're kind of like, oh man, it stinks in here. But pickled pork, Makes sense. So a lot of Carl's neighbors would actually go directly to him, knock on his door, knock, knock, hello. Carl would answer. They're like, hey, your place stinks and it's coming into my place, okay? You know, like, this is disgusting. Clean up or I'm going to complain. And then Carl would tell the neighbors, well, he would play like the smallest little violin, you know, because he would tell them like, I'm suffering from a mysterious illness nobody has the answer to. And the only treatment he found that worked needed an ingredient that he could only get from dogs, their bodies. I don't know what it was, but he said he got it from dogs. That's what he tells the neighbors. Like, you guys, wild times. So that was a smell. And he was like, how dare you guys be rude? I have a mysterious illness. And they left him alone. You know? But yeah, that must have been very stinky. What police found in the apartment matched up with what people knew of Carl. Supplies for pickling. He had jars filled with goods. Fresh pork was in like the ice box. There was also a lot of materials so he could make soap, leather tanning, and lots of like leather working stuff. It's just like all the little things he needed to sell and make his goods, right? Normal. So while police are looking around the home, they also find a pile of bones, which they figured were pig bones because he's the pork guy. Pigs have bones, right? Yes. But then, upon further inspection in the kitchen, one of the officers comes across a dish, very suspicious dish. You know, it has something weird in it. So he gets a little closer to it and he sees that it's a dish of 240 teeth. Not just any teeth. These were human teeth. Huh? Yeah. I was wondering, like, how did he determine 240? Did he sit there and count? Or was that later? Either way, he found the dish of teeth. So once they come across the teeth, that's when officers start to look around the home and they're like, wait a minute. If that's human teeth, like, how do we know that all this stuff we're looking at is actually pig related and not human related? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they were like, oh shit, this is not good. And sure enough, they were actually right. The pile of bones were sorted through. And they were not pig bones. Nay. Police found in total 2 shoulder blades, a pair of collar bones, 16 femurs, 15 medium-sized pieces of long bones, 4 pairs of elbow bones, 7 heads of radii, 9 lower parts of radii, 8 lower parts of the elbow, a pair of the upper shin bone, lower elbows. There was upper arms. There were upper arm heads, 8 heels, ankle bones, 120 toes. I know, that's random. 65 feet, 150 pieces of ribs. Bro, you good? They find that pile of bones that they thought were pigs in this guy's house. They go through it, and that's what they come across. That long list of nonsense. And they're like, where the F did he get all this stuff? Where did he get all of that? 65 feet? What's he doing? Is he a foot guy? 120 toes. Anyways, so they find that, okay? They go into Carl's bedroom. I don't even want to know what's in there. But they go in there and they see suspenders, belts, shoelaces, all goods that he sold as part of his business. But his closet, they open up his closet and it was full of like blood-stained clothing, just bloody trousers and shirts and whatnot. All of it, though, was covered in blood. Why is it in there, Carl? So remember, in the beginning I said Carl sold his pork products, pork-related products. He was a pork-loving guy. He was a porker. But also, he sold leather goods like wallets, belts, stuff like that. Well, of course, maybe you have guessed by now, but Carl over here, he was not just selling any normal leather goods, normal wallets and belts. Instead, he was making leather goods out of human skin. Oh yes, he was Ed Geining it. Do you remember the Ed Gein video? He made nipple belts. Yeah. I mean, Carl wasn't making nipple belts, but he was making human skin belts. Just as questionable, I would say. They even found some products that had like human hair, kind of used as like little details. Kind of cute, but again, human hair. So, no. So police were like, we should probably send a sample of Carl's pickled pork to a lab and have them test it to make sure it's actual pork, right? So they do that. And while they're waiting for the lab to come back with the results, police keep searching his place. And that's where they would find documentation that not only proved Carl's crime against the axe wound survivor, but also against 31 other people. Oh, yeah. You see, Carl over here, he liked to keep things organized, I guess, or maybe he just liked journaling. He liked a diary because he had a journal or like a spreadsheet of all the names, date of death, and the weight of the meat he was able to remove from each body. He was like, yeah, this one was real juicy. Nom, nom, nom. I don't know what this guy was doing. Why? Carl also had a collection of documents from his victims. There were items like legal identification, money, their wallets, just stuff that were on the victims at the time. Carl also had a large collection of newspaper clippings of people who had recently been released from local prisons and hospitals. So that kind of, I was like, what? Why was he doing that? But it makes sense now. Because this is full speculation, but I think it's spot on. Maybe considering these people as his next victims because they're vulnerable, they're needing a place to stay, they just got released from prison or a hospital, they were probably easy targets for Carl. So that's why he had this huge collection of all these people just got released, I should hit him up. Later, examinations by police managed to identify 20 of the victims within Carl's records, though it's possible he had even more victims than the 31 he originally recorded. But the material evidence in his apartment indicated that he may have killed as many as 40 people. Especially because they found all those teeth. The math ain't mathin', So most of Carl's victims were generally reported to be middle-aged men, but the ages, they ranged from 16 years old all the way up to 70, 75, 76. So he was pretty flexible with his ages. So because Carl had recorded all of the dates that his victims had died, it showed that he had been killing and pickling people for at least 10 years. Investigators also came across an entry in his diary that indicated to them that Carl may have murdered someone as early as 1903. So this dude has been busy. He would allegedly, I don't want him coming after me, that his ghost, lure people into his home with the promise of a job or a place to stay, but they never left. Next thing you know, they're baking or something. You're probably wondering at home, what in the hell happened in this man's life that turned him into a goddamn cannibal? Sadly, we'll never really know. No real confession except for the one right before Carl had killed himself. That wasn't a confession, but it could be considered a confession. So I guess later on, it would come out that Carl had told one of the police officers, before he had obviously killed himself, that he had exclusively eaten human meat for 3 years. Carl, that's all he had been eating. He told a police officer this. And this guy thought oh, whatever. He's just joking around. You're so funny, Carl. But he was being serious, obviously. This dude is a little fucked up. I don't know about you guys, but I think he's a little off. Oh. Remember all that pork that they had sent to the lab? Well, you could probably guess it was definitely not pork. Nay. It was indeed human meat. Carl had been selling human meat. Oh, yeah. Everyone in the town, when they found out that they had been eating human meat, they were rightfully freaked the hell out. Could you imagine? There was a report that there was an entire wedding that had ordered Carl's special meat. Bro, on your wedding day, you straight up ate people. Could you imagine? My life would be ruined. Oh, gross. On your wedding day? Maybe on another day, but your wedding day? Carl, come on. Again, there's no trial, no real confession, but there were a few folks who had a great old time with this story, and those people were the press. The press loved this. They went bonkers. They're losing their shit. Their heads are exploding over this one. So many different theories, opinions, blah, 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 and of course they even use this as an opportunity to make it into a political issue in different cases.
And it was getting people talking. When Carl was most active killing people, this is a time when everyone was literally like starving to death. So some had reported that it was the government's fault and the lack of resources that drove an upstanding model citizen to literally eat people. And it's the government you should be blaming, not Papa Carl. You should all be ashamed. In fact, there might be something kind of to that. Even though it sounds like a stretch, you know, like, you should be mad, government. A little, anyways. Because Carl wasn't the only prominent cannibal working in Germany around this time. Oh, nay, he was just one of a few. Cannibalism was all the rage during this time. There were 2 highly visible cannibals also around this same time. One was Fritz Harman, who was called the Butcher of Hanover or the Vampire of Hanover, and he committed at least 24 murders during the years of 1918 to 1924 and was called the Vampire because his preferred killing method was to bite into his victims' necks. Yeah. They never actually found any actual evidence that he ate his victims, but they did know that he dismembered some of them and also sold contraband meat that was always, quote, boneless, diced, and often sold as ground meat. I wonder how many times we've eaten human meat. We didn't even know it. Oh my God. So, another delightful man went by the name of Carl. A different Carl, Grossman, which is kind of fitting. But he was known as Jack the Slaughterer or the Berlin Butcher. We have to do stories on these guys, like they're all in separate videos. Oh, side note, I don't know where they got the name Jack from Carl. I always have these types of questions and rarely any answers. But anywho, this demon, his murders spanned from 1918 to 1921, where he was also known to kill and dismember his victims, and then he would sell the meat. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out, like, what, didn't it taste different? I don't know. Nobody noticed that their friends were, like, going missing and stuff? Nobody found hair in their meat? I mean, come on. What is going on over there? Anyways, that guy, this other Carl guy, this demon guy, he was making hot dogs and stuff out of the meat. So 2 Carls, 1 cup. They both loved to make food, hot dogs, the pickled pork. It's just like, is that a fetish to watch people eat this? Is it? I don't know. I should have looked that up. What is that? That's a side note, but cannibals always interest me the most just because it's so far opposite than anything I've ever known. Hopefully that you could feel the same way too. You're not eating people, but it's just fascinating because it just doesn't make sense. Right? I don't know. Yeah. Let me get this lash on. Ooh. So the one problem that investigators would have with these types of humans would be that they would rarely come across any evidence because the evidence would be eaten. Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to put it. The evidence was eaten. So it's kind of like there's no solid evidence except for in this Carl case. They found obviously all the meat and the bones and all that. But in the other cases, they really had a hard time. So the press at this time was using these 3 other stories to build this like larger issue that these extremely tough times basically are breeding serial killers. And not only that, it's driving people to eat other humans out of hunger. This is like the narrative that they're putting out there. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like, I don't know. You can't be mad at it. It kind of makes sense. Don't come for me. It's not like I'm saying like, yes, eat people, but whatever. Or maybe it was just people trying to find some kind of answer since these crimes were just so brutal and disgusting that maybe it helped to think like, hey, maybe they were just really hungry. You know, maybe that kind of helped with the anxiety of it all. Well, in the end, this definitely had a lasting effect in the neighborhood, the area where Carl was selling his stuff. The neighbors in his community, they were very upset. They were very nervous about eating meat. Rightfully so. I wouldn't blame them. I probably would become a vegetarian. Also in the area, in this town, a lot of businesses that sold meat were actually forced to close down. And now everyone in that town are vegans. Just kidding. But like,
it would make sense. I mean, I wonder what other secrets this man had. Well, there you have it, friends. That's the story of Carl Denke and his house of horrors. Horrors. Not horrors. Horrors. This man was like truly disturbed. And I don't know, like, was he starving or was he a sicko? If he were just starving, I think personally he would maybe tell his customers, like, hey, it's not pork. It's your neighbor, your old neighbor. His name's Brad. Remember him? Yeah. That's who you're gonna eat. Like, maybe he would tell people that. But why would he tell people that? I would love to hear your guys' opinions down below. Starving or just a killer? What was he gonna do with all those damn teeth? I'm curious. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. A happy Thanksgiving. And, oh, it's almost my birthday. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But other than that, let me know down below in the comment section who you want me to talk about next time. I'll be seeing you guys later. Have a good day. Make good choices. Goodbye.